When you stop looking, life does not become empty, it becomes clear. They told you to chase harder, search longer, hold tighter, and never rest until you find what is missing. But if searching was the answer, why do so many people feel lost, even while moving fast? Why do they keep finding new goals, new people, new dreams, and still feel hungry inside? Buddhist wisdom teaches that what you truly need is not always found by running after it. Sometimes it appears when the mind becomes quiet, when the hands stop gripping, and when the heart stops begging life to arrive on command. The moment you stop looking with fear, you begin to see what has been waiting quietly around you. Tonight, as you listen, something in you will begin to relax. The pressure to force life will loosen, the noise of wanting will grow softer, and you may finally understand this truth. When you stop looking, everything you need finds you, because you are no longer too restless to receive it. This is not about giving up on life. This is about becoming still enough for life to meet you. Are you ready? Let us begin. And now that you have seen how life begins to open when you stop chasing, something deeper starts to reveal itself. Because stopping is not just peaceful, it is uncomfortable. It exposes something most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid. The constant movement, the endless searching, the quiet pressure to find more. It is not harmless. It is doing something to you, slowly, silently, every single day. There is a cost to always looking, and most people never notice it. Something inside you is being pushed, pulled, stretched in ways that feel normal, but are not. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is a tension that lives inside the human mind, and most people carry it without question. It feels like a quiet urge, a soft pressure that says, there must be something more. Keep going, keep searching. At first it sounds harmless, even helpful. It sounds like growth, like ambition, like the voice that keeps you moving forward. But beneath that voice, there is something else, something far less gentle. Every time you believe that this moment is not enough, something inside you tightens. Every time you look at your life and say, not yet, not quite, not good enough, you create a small fracture between you and your experience. And the mind does this so often that it begins to feel normal, like breathing. You wake up, and before the day has even begun, your attention is already reaching into the future, trying to secure something that will finally make you feel complete. But what if that movement, that constant reaching, is not neutral? What if it is quietly violent? Not the kind of violence that leaves visible wounds, but the kind that wears you down over time. The kind that disconnects you from the simple, quiet stability that already exists beneath all your effort. When the mind is always searching, it never rests. It does not sit with what is here. It does not listen. It does not receive. It only scans, compares, evaluates. It treats every moment like a problem to solve instead of a reality to experience. And in doing so, it begins to miss everything that does not fit into its expectations. You could be sitting in a peaceful room, nothing wrong, nothing missing, and still feel uneasy. Not because something is actually wrong, but because the mind has trained itself to look for what is not there instead of what is. It becomes a habit of absence, a way of living that constantly highlights lack. And the strange part is, the more you follow that habit, the stronger it becomes. It is like scratching an itch that never heals. The more you scratch, the more irritated it becomes, and the more you feel the need to scratch again. The search feeds itself. It convinces you that relief is just one more step away, one more achievement, one more answer, one more change. But every time you reach that next point, the feeling returns. Not because you failed, but because the mechanism itself creates the feeling. This is where the hidden violence reveals itself. It is not in what you are doing, but in how you are relating to your own life. You are not allowing it to be enough, even for a moment. There is a quiet rejection happening inside you, again and again, a refusal to sit with what is already here, and over time, that refusal becomes exhausting. You start to feel restless without knowing why. You feel like you are always slightly behind, slightly incomplete, slightly out of place. Even when things go well, the satisfaction does not last, because the mind is already preparing the next search. It is like trying to drink water from a cup with a hole in it. No matter how much you pour in, it never stays. And yet most people never question this pattern. They believe it is just how life works. They believe that searching is necessary, that without it, nothing would happen. And in a practical sense, yes, movement has its place, effort has its place. But the problem is not action. The problem is the tension behind it. Action that comes from clarity feels different. It is clean, direct, grounded. But searching that comes from lack feels urgent, anxious, restless. It carries a subtle desperation, even if you cannot name it. You can see it in how people move through their days. Always checking, always refreshing, always comparing. Looking at others, measuring themselves, wondering if they are falling behind. It becomes a constant mental noise, a background hum that never fully turns off. And because it is so common, it feels normal. But normal does not mean healthy. The mind begins to lose its ability to be still. Even in moments of rest, it keeps moving. It replays the past. It imagines the future. It creates scenarios. It solves problems that do not exist yet. It cannot simply be where it is, because it has been trained to believe that where it is not enough. This is the quiet damage of constant searching. It separates you from your own life. You stop experiencing things directly. Instead, you experience your thoughts about them. You stop tasting your food because you are thinking about what to do next. You stop hearing people fully because you are preparing your response. You stop feeling the present moment because your attention is somewhere else. And over time, life begins to feel dull, even when it is not. Not because life has lost its richness, but because your awareness is no longer here to receive it. There is also a deeper layer to this. Constant searching creates an identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who is always on the way to something, someone who is not there yet, someone who needs to become more, do more, fix more, and that identity becomes difficult to let go of. Because if you stop searching, who are you? If you are not improving, not chasing, not building towards something, what remains? For many people, that question feels uncomfortable. It feels empty. And so they return to the search, not because it brings peace, but because it gives them a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. But here is the quiet truth. Purpose does not have to come from lack. Movement does not have to come from dissatisfaction. You can act, create, grow, and explore without rejecting where you are. But to see that, you have to pause. And that pause is where most people struggle. Because when you stop searching, even for a moment, you begin to feel everything you have been running from. The discomfort, the uncertainty, the silence. It can feel like nothing is happening, like you are losing time, like you are falling behind. But what is actually happening is something much more important. The noise is settling, the mind is losing its grip, the constant tension begins to loosen, and underneath all of that, there is a different kind of presence. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just simple, quiet, steady. At first it feels unfamiliar, almost too still. But if you stay with it without trying to change it, something begins to shift. You start to notice things again, small things, the way the light falls in a room, the sound of your own breathing, the feeling of being here without needing anything else to complete it. And in that space, something becomes clear. You were never actually missing as much as you thought. The search made it feel that way. The constant comparison, the endless reaching, the habit of looking for what is not here, it created the illusion of lack. But when that movement slows down, even slightly, you begin to see that life has been offering you moments of completeness all along. You just were not still enough to receive them. This is why the act of stopping is so powerful. Not because it gives you something new, but because it reveals what has always been present. It allows you to reconnect with a part of yourself that does not need to chase, does not need to prove, does not need to become something else in order to be okay. And from that place, something interesting happens. You can still move, you can still act, you can still pursue things, but the energy behind it changes. It is no longer driven by urgency or fear. It becomes lighter, more natural, more aligned. You begin to do things because they feel right, not because you are trying to fill a gap. And life begins to respond differently. Not because the world has changed, but because your way of relating to it has. The hidden violence of constant searching starts to dissolve, and in its place, something much quieter begins to grow. A sense of enough, not as a concept, not as an idea you force yourself to believe, but as a direct experience, a feeling that, in this moment, nothing is missing. And from that feeling, everything changes. And once you begin to see the hidden violence of constant searching, another truth comes closer. You start to notice that even the things you call peaceful can become another form of pressure. Even the desire to be calm can turn into a chase. Even the wish to feel better can quietly become one more reason to feel broken. Because the mind is clever. It can turn anything into a race, even stillness. And this is where many people get trapped. They are no longer chasing money, approval, status, or attention. They are chasing peace, and because peace looks holy, quiet, and harmless, they do not notice that they are still running. But the soul knows, the body knows, the heart knows, because there is a kind of tiredness that comes from trying too hard to be okay. There is a strange pain in wanting peace so badly that you cannot relax until it comes. You sit in silence, but inside you are still begging. You close your eyes, but the mind is still checking. Am I calm yet? Is this working? Why do I still feel heavy? Why am I not healed by now? And suddenly, peace becomes another task on your list, another mountain to climb, another place where you feel you are failing. This is why chasing peace often pushes peace further away. Not because peace is hiding from you, but because the energy of chasing is the opposite of peace. Peace cannot grow in a mind that is squeezing itself. Peace cannot settle in a heart that is being forced to hurry. Peace cannot be held by hands that are clenched too tightly around the idea of having it. In Buddhist wisdom, this is one of the most delicate lessons. The thing you grasp becomes the thing you lose. The more you demand life to give you calm, the more disturbed you become. The more you fight your thoughts, the louder they seem. The more you reject your feelings, the heavier they become. It is like trying to smooth water with your hands. The more you touch it, the more ripples you create. Many people begin their spiritual journey because they are tired. They are tired of pain, tired of overthinking, tired of disappointment, tired of carrying emotions they do not know how to put down. So they come to meditation, prayer, silence, wisdom, books, teachings, and practices. And there is nothing wrong with that. Pain often brings people to the door of truth. But the mistake begins when they treat peace like a prize they must win. They sit down to meditate, but they are not really sitting. They are waiting for something to happen. They want the mind to become quiet quickly. They want the body to feel light. They want the sadness to disappear. They want the fear to leave like a guest who has overstayed. And when that does not happen, they become frustrated. They say, "I tried to be peaceful, but it did not work." But peace is not a button. Peace is not a product. Peace is not a mood you can order and receive immediately. Peace is what becomes visible when you stop arguing with the moment. And that is difficult, because most people do not want peace as much as they want control. They say they want peace, but what they really want is for life to finally obey them. They want people to act the way they prefer. They want uncertainty to disappear. They want their emotions to become neat and predictable. They want the future to send a written guarantee that everything will be okay. But that is not peace. That is control wearing soft clothing. True peace is different. True peace does not mean life finally becomes easy. It means you stop adding extra suffering to what is already happening. It means you stop fighting the rain because you wanted sunshine. It means you stop turning every discomfort into a personal emergency. This does not make you weak. It makes you honest. Because life will not always match your plan. People will not always understand you. Your mind will not always be quiet. Your heart will not always feel light. Some days will be heavy for no clear reason. Some mornings will begin with a strange sadness. Some nights will bring old memories back, like visitors knocking at the door. If you believe peace means none of this should happen, you will suffer twice. First, from the pain itself. Then from the belief that the pain should not be there. This second suffering is where most people lose themselves. They do not only feel anxious, they become anxious about being anxious. They do not only feel sad, they become ashamed of being sad. They do not only feel restless, they start thinking something is wrong with them because they are not calm enough. And this creates a loop. The mind says, I must get rid of this feeling. The feeling becomes stronger. The mind says, why is it still here? The body tightens, the heart closes, and peace moves further away, not because it hates you, but because you are trying to enter peace by attacking yourself. Buddhist wisdom asks for a different approach. Instead of chasing peace, meet what is here, not dramatically, not perfectly, just honestly. If there is fear, notice fear. If there is sadness, notice sadness. If there is anger, notice anger. If there is restlessness, notice restlessness. Do not dress it up. Do not push it away. Do not pretend to be more spiritual than you are. The mind loves pretending. It can put on a calm face while inside it is wrestling with 10 wild animals. But the body is not fooled. The heart is not fooled. Real peace begins when pretending ends. There is something deeply relieving about saying, this is what is here right now. Not, this is who I am forever. Not, this means my life is broken. Not, this feeling must disappear before I can breathe. Just, this is what is here right now. That one sentence can soften the whole inner world. Because suddenly, you are no longer at war with your own experience. You are no longer turning the mind into a battlefield. You are no longer making your emotions prove that they deserve to exist. You are simply allowing life to be present in its current shape. And strangely, what is allowed often begins to change. Not always immediately, not because you forced it, but because resistance was feeding it. This is one of the quiet secrets of the inner life. Many emotions do not stay because they are powerful. They stay because we keep fighting them. We hold them in place with our rejection. We keep checking if they are gone. We keep asking why they came. We keep building stories around them. A small fear becomes a prophecy. A passing sadness becomes an identity. A moment of confusion becomes proof that we are lost. And the mind, being a storyteller, turns one cloud into a whole weather report. But when you stop chasing peace, you stop demanding that every cloud leave the sky. You begin to understand that the sky was never harmed by the cloud. The sky does not panic when storms pass through it. It does not say, I have failed because there is rain today. It simply holds it all. This is the kind of peace Buddhist wisdom points toward. Not a peace that depends on perfect conditions. A peace wide enough to include imperfect conditions. This is why stillness is not the same as numbness. Some people think peace means feeling nothing. They think a peaceful person never gets upset, never cries, never feels lonely, never doubts, never aches. But that is not peace. That is stone. A peaceful heart is not a dead heart. It is a heart that has learned not to turn every feeling into a prison. You can feel pain and still not become the pain. You can feel fear and still not obey the fear. You can feel desire and still not be dragged by it. You can feel uncertainty and still not collapse before it. That is peace. It is not the absence of waves. It is the discovery that you are deeper than the waves. But if you chase peace as a feeling, you will always be disappointed, because feelings change. Today you may feel calm. Tomorrow you may feel disturbed. If your peace depends on feeling calm all the time, then your peace is very fragile. It will be broken by traffic, a rude message, a delayed payment, a bad memory, or someone looking at you the wrong way. That is not real freedom. Real freedom is when your peace does not need every moment to be pleasant. It can sit with discomfort without becoming cruel. It can face uncertainty without inventing disasters. It can hear criticism without losing its own center. It can want something deeply without begging it to complete you. And this kind of peace does not come from chasing. It comes from intimacy with the present moment. That sounds simple, but simple does not mean easy, because the present moment is where everything you have avoided waits for you. When you stop running, you may first meet your tiredness. You may meet grief. You may meet old shame. You may meet the quiet loneliness you covered with noise. You may meet the question you have been avoiding. What am I really searching for? This is why many people cannot stay still. They say silence is boring, but often silence is not boring. Silence is revealing. It shows you what your distractions have been hiding. And if you do not understand this, you may think peace is not working. You may sit quietly and feel more discomfort, then conclude that stillness is the problem. But the stillness did not create the discomfort. It only removed the noise that was covering it. This is like cleaning a room after years of throwing things into corners. At first, it looks messier. Dust rises. Forgotten objects appear. You may even regret starting, but that does not mean cleaning is wrong. It means you are finally seeing what has been there. Inner peace is similar. At first, slowing down can make you aware of the very unrest you were trying to escape. But stay gently. Do not force. Do not turn healing into another performance. Do not demand that your heart become a temple overnight. A garden does not bloom because you stand over it shouting, "Grow faster." It blooms because the conditions become right. Sunlight, water, time, patience, space. Your inner life is also a garden, and chasing peace is like digging up the seed every few minutes to check if it has grown. You disturb the very process you are hoping for. So what does it mean to stop chasing peace? It means you stop making peace a condition for self-acceptance. You stop saying, "I will only be okay when I am calm." You begin to say, "Even this restless part of me is allowed to be seen." That changes everything, because the restless part of you does not need punishment. It needs understanding. The anxious part of you is not your enemy. It is often a part of you that has tried for a long time to protect you. It learned to scan for danger. It learned to prepare for disappointment. It learned to hold tightly because somewhere along the way, letting go felt unsafe. So when you chase peace by attacking anxiety, you only create more fear inside yourself. But when you meet anxiety with compassion, something softens. You can say, "I see you. You are trying to protect me, but we do not have to run right now." This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The mind calms down more easily when it feels heard. The body relaxes more deeply when it feels safe. The heart opens more naturally when it is not being forced. And gradually, peace stops being something in front of you. It becomes something beneath you. a ground you return to again and again, even when life shakes. This is why Buddhist practice often begins with awareness, not control. Awareness does not say, change this immediately. Awareness says, see this clearly. Because what you see clearly, you no longer have to carry blindly. When you see that you are chasing peace, you can smile gently at the pattern, not mock yourself, not shame yourself, just notice. Ah, the mind is trying to get somewhere again. The mind is trying to escape this moment again. That noticing is already a doorway. The moment you see the chase, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. You have created space, and space is where peace breathes. Without space, everything feels urgent. One thought fills the whole room. One fear becomes the whole truth. One disappointment becomes your entire future. But with space, things return to their real size. A thought is just a thought. A feeling is just a feeling. A delay is just a delay. A closed door is just a closed door. Not a punishment, not a prophecy, not proof that life has forgotten you. This is how peace begins to return, not with fireworks, not with a sudden magical silence, but with small moments of not believing every storm in your mind. You pause, you breathe, you notice. You let the moment be unfinished, and in that unfinished moment, you are still here. That is powerful, because so much of your suffering comes from believing you must solve everything before you can rest. But there will always be something unsolved, always. A bill, a decision, a memory, a person, a plan, a question, a dream, a fear. If you wait until all of life is settled before you allow yourself peace, you may wait your whole life. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to wait for life to stop moving. It asks you to stop being dragged by every movement. There is a difference. You can still take action. You can still make decisions. You can still improve your life, but you do not have to do it from panic. You do not have to treat every moment as if your worth depends on the next result. When you stop chasing peace, your actions become cleaner. You answer the message because it needs answering, not because your anxiety is whipping you. You work because work matters, not because you are trying to outrun the fear of being nobody. You rest because the body needs rest, not because you have finally earned the right to be human. You love because love is alive in you, not because you are trying to force someone to rescue you from yourself. This is the quiet maturity of peace. It stops being a mood you chase and becomes a way you move. And this kind of peace is humble. It does not announce itself loudly. It may look ordinary from the outside. You still wash dishes. You still pay bills. You still sit in traffic. You still deal with people who test your patience like they were sent by a secret committee. But inside, something is different. You are not fighting every moment anymore. You are not trying to squeeze life into your preferred shape before you allow yourself to breathe. You begin to trust that you can meet this moment as it is, not because it is perfect, but because you are no longer demanding perfection before you become present. And this is where the phrase, "When you stop looking, everything you need finds you," begins to make deeper sense. Because peace was not far away. It was not hidden behind the next achievement, the next relationship, the next apology, the next spiritual breakthrough, or the next perfect morning routine. Peace was waiting underneath the chase. It was covered by the noise of wanting life to be different before you could soften. And when the chase begins to slow, peace does not have to travel toward you. You simply stop walking away from it. That is why people sometimes feel calm after finally surrendering. Nothing outside has changed, but the inner fight has stopped. The body exhales, the heart loosens. The mind no longer has to hold the whole universe together with tired hands, and for the first time in a long time, you feel the quiet truth. You are here. This moment is here. Breath is here. life is still carrying you. Maybe not in the way you demanded, maybe not on the timeline you planned, but still, something is holding you, something is allowing you to continue, something is giving you another breath, another step, another chance to meet life without turning it into an enemy. This is not a small thing. To be able to sit in the middle of uncertainty and not collapse into fear is a deep form of wealth. To be able to feel longing without becoming desperate is a deep form of strength. To be able to let your mind be noisy without hating yourself for it is a deep form of kindness. And kindness is one of the doors to peace. Not the sweet, soft kindness people talk about casually, but the brave kindness that says, "I will not abandon myself just because this moment is difficult." That is where peace becomes real, not when everything is easy, but when you stop using difficulty as proof that peace is impossible. So tonight, if there is something in you still chasing, still trying to fix everything, still asking, "When will I finally be okay?" let it hear this gently. You do not have to hunt peace like it is a missing object. You do not have to become perfect before you are allowed to rest. You do not have to silence every thought before you are worthy of stillness. You only have to stop turning this moment into an enemy. Start there. Let the breath come. Let the body soften by even one small degree. Let the mind be noisy without making it a crime. Let your heart admit what it feels without turning every feeling into a life sentence. And little by little, the chase loses power. The distance between you and peace becomes smaller, not because you finally caught it, but because you stopped running past it. And as this understanding settles, another doorway opens. Because if peace does not come from chasing, then maybe fulfillment does not come from more either. Maybe the mind must learn something it has resisted for a long time. Maybe before life changes, before the dream arrives, before the answer appears, there is one word the heart must understand: enough. And as the chase begins to loosen, something unfamiliar starts to appear. Not excitement, not achievement, not the rush of getting something new, something quieter, something most people avoid without even knowing it. Because once you stop running, one question slowly rises to the surface. What if this moment is already enough? And that question can feel uncomfortable, almost dangerous, because if this is enough, then what have you been chasing all this time? There is a deep resistance to the idea of enough, not because it is wrong, but because it challenges the identity the mind has built around always becoming more. It quietly removes the urgency that has been driving your decisions, your habits, your thoughts. And without that urgency, the mind feels like it is losing something important. But what it is really losing is the illusion that peace lives somewhere else. There is a kind of emptiness people feel when they first encounter the idea of enough. It does not feel like peace immediately. It can feel like a pause with no direction, like standing still when you are used to moving, like sitting in silence when you are used to noise. The mind begins to whisper, "If I accept this as enough, will I stop growing? Will I become lazy? Will I miss out on something better?" These questions are not random. They come from years of conditioning. From a world that has taught you that satisfaction is dangerous, that contentment is weakness, that stopping is failure. You have been trained to believe that you must always be reaching for something just beyond your grasp. But Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to stop growing. It asks you to stop growing from a place of lack. There is a difference. Growing from lack feels like you are trying to fill a hole inside yourself. No matter how much you add, the hole still feels open. You achieve something, and for a moment it feels good. Then the feeling fades, and the mind looks for the next thing. You improve yourself, but you still feel incomplete. You reach one level, then immediately compare yourself to a higher one. This kind of growth never rests, but growing from enough feels different. It is not driven by fear. It is not driven by comparison. It is not driven by the need to prove something. It comes from a quiet sense of stability, a feeling that even as you move forward, you are not trying to escape where you are. You can build a life from peace instead of from pressure, and this is where the real meaning of enough begins to reveal itself. Enough does not mean everything is perfect. Enough does not mean there is nothing left to do. Enough does not mean you stop caring about your future. Enough means that in this moment you are not lacking as a person. It means you are not incomplete in your existence. It means you do not need to become someone else before you are allowed to feel at ease. This is a subtle but powerful shift, because most people tie their sense of worth to future outcomes. They say, I will be enough when I achieve this. I will be enough when I become that. I will be enough when people finally see me a certain way. And so their peace is always postponed. It is always waiting for the next milestone, the next approval, the next confirmation. But that waiting creates tension. It turns life into a test you feel you are constantly taking. It turns every moment into preparation instead of experience. You wake up not to live, but to fix, improve, optimize, and secure. And slowly, you lose touch with the simple fact that being alive right now is not something you have to earn. It is already given. The Buddhist idea of enough brings you back to this. It reminds you that your value is not created by your progress. Your value is not measured by your productivity. Your value is not determined by how much you have figured out. You are already here, and that is not a small thing. There is a quiet dignity in accepting that, not loudly, not as a statement to impress others, but as a private understanding, a soft realization that you can sit with yourself without constantly trying to change yourself, that you can exist without performing, that you can breathe without needing to prove anything. At first, this feels unfamiliar, because the mind is used to evaluating everything. It wants to know, is this enough? Am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? But the question begins to soften when you stop feeding it. Instead of answering the mind with more plans, more goals, more pressure, you begin to respond with presence. You return to the body. You notice your breath. You feel your feet on the ground. You hear the sounds around you. And for a moment, the need to measure fades. This is where enough begins to be felt, not just understood. It is not an idea you force yourself to believe. It is an experience that reveals itself when the mind is not constantly searching for something else. And from this place, something interesting happens. You do not lose your desire to grow. You lose the desperation behind it. You can still want things. You can still move toward goals. You can still improve your life. But now, your movement is not coming from emptiness. It is coming from fullness. You are not trying to fix yourself. You are expressing yourself. There is a lightness in that, a freedom. Because now success is not what makes you whole. It becomes something you can enjoy without depending on it. Failure is not what breaks you. It becomes something you can learn from without losing yourself in it. People's opinions are not what define you. They become something you can listen to without being controlled by them. Life stops being a constant negotiation for your worth. And this changes how you see everything. Even simple things begin to feel different. A quiet morning no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful. A simple meal no longer feels lacking. It feels enough. A conversation no longer feels like something to impress through. It becomes something to be present in. You begin to notice how much of your life was overlooked because it did not feel like enough before. Moments that were already complete were dismissed because they were not exciting enough, not impressive enough, not productive enough. But now there is a shift. You start to see value in what is ordinary. Not because you are lowering your standards, but because you are removing the constant filter of comparison. And when comparison fades, life becomes richer, because it is no longer competing with an imagined version of how it should be. It is allowed to be what it is. This is one of the deepest teachings behind enough. It is not about reducing your life. It is about seeing your life clearly, without distortion, without constant judgment, without the need to upgrade every experience before you can appreciate it. There is also a deep trust that begins to grow when you live from enough. A trust that you are not falling behind. A trust that your path is unfolding in its own way. A trust that not everything needs to be rushed. This does not mean you become passive. It means you stop forcing things that are not ready. You stop chasing people who are not aligned. You stop trying to control outcomes that are not in your hands. You begin to work with life instead of against it. And life feels different when you are not constantly pushing it. It feels more responsive, more open, more fluid. You begin to see opportunities you missed before, not because they were hidden, but because your attention was too busy looking elsewhere. You begin to meet people without trying to extract something from them. And because of that, connections become more genuine. You begin to act without the heavy weight of expectation. And because of that, your actions become more effective. There is a quiet strength in this way of living. It does not look dramatic. It does not need to be announced, but it is stable. And stability is what allows growth to be sustainable. Because growth that comes from pressure eventually collapses. Growth that comes from enough continues. It adapts. It breathes. It does not burn you out. It does not turn you into someone who is always chasing the next version of yourself. Instead, it allows you to evolve naturally, without losing yourself in the process. There is also a kind of peace that comes with enough that cannot be taken away easily, because it is not dependent on circumstances. If your peace comes from having everything go your way, then it will disappear the moment something changes. But if your peace comes from knowing that you are already enough in this moment, then even when things shift, something inside you remains steady. You may feel disappointed. You may feel uncertain. You may feel challenged. But you do not collapse into the belief that you are lacking. That belief begins to fade, and that is freedom. Because so much of human suffering comes from the belief that you are not enough as you are, that you must become something else before you are allowed to rest. But rest does not have to be earned. Peace does not have to be achieved. They are available in the absence of resistance. And enough is the doorway. When you stop insisting that something must change before you can be okay, you begin to experience what is already here. And what is already here is often more than you realized. Breath, awareness, the ability to feel, the ability to see, the ability to notice, the simple fact of being alive. These things are not small, but they are often ignored because they do not match the mind's idea of what matters. The mind wants something dramatic, something impressive, something that proves something. But life is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, and in that quiet, there is a depth that is easily missed. The more you practice seeing enough, the more that depth becomes visible. You begin to see how much you have been given, not in a forced way, not in a way that denies your struggles, but in a balanced way. You can acknowledge difficulty without losing sight of what is still present, and this creates a kind of inner balance. You are no longer swinging between extremes. You are not lost in lack. You are not lost in illusion. You are grounded. And from that ground, life begins to change. Not because you forced it, but because your relationship with it has shifted. You are no longer chasing from emptiness. You are moving from fullness. And that movement is different. It is calmer. It is clearer. It is more aligned. You begin to trust your timing. You begin to trust your path. You begin to trust that not everything has to happen immediately, and that trust removes a lot of pressure. Because urgency often comes from fear. Fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear of not becoming what you think you should be. But when you feel enough, those fears lose their grip. You realize that life is not a race you must win. It is something you are already inside, and you cannot fall out of. Your own life. You can only become more present in it. This is where the phrase begins to deepen even further. When you stop looking, everything you need finds you, not because life suddenly becomes generous, but because you are no longer blind to what is already here. And from this place, another layer begins to unfold, because if enough is already here, then what you thought was missing may not be what you need, and what you need may not come in the way you expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly, so quietly that you almost miss it. And this is where the next lesson begins. Because what you need does not always look like something special. Sometimes it looks like something you would normally ignore. And as you begin to feel what enough truly means, something else starts to reveal itself. Because the mind does not give up its habits easily. Even when you stop chasing in obvious ways, it finds quieter, more acceptable ways to continue. It changes its language. It changes its appearance. It stops calling itself desire and starts calling itself something more respectable. Growth, improvement, discipline, becoming better. And on the surface, all of that sounds right. But underneath, something familiar is still moving. A subtle push, a quiet dissatisfaction, a feeling that who you are right now is still not quite enough. And this is where things become more difficult to see. Because now, the chase no longer looks like a problem. It looks like progress. There is a version of desire that hides behind good intentions. It does not shout. It does not rush wildly. It speaks calmly. It says things like, I just want to improve myself, or I want to become the best version of me, or I want to grow. And none of these are wrong. But the question is not what you are saying. The question is what is driving it, because the same action can come from two very different places. You can improve your life from a place of fullness, or you can improve your life from a place of lack. And those two feel completely different, even if they look the same on the outside. When desire disguises itself as self-improvement, it becomes harder to question. Because now it feels justified. You wake up early, you work on yourself, you read, you learn, you push, you plan, you optimize your habits. You try to become more focused, more productive, more disciplined. And again, none of that is wrong. But if underneath all of it there is a quiet voice saying, I am not enough yet, then no matter how much you do, you will carry that feeling with you. It will not disappear with achievement. It will not dissolve with progress. It will follow you quietly into every version of yourself you become. Because it was never about what you were doing. It was about how you were seeing yourself. This is why some people achieve so much and still feel restless. They improve their bodies but still feel insecure. They improve their finances but still feel anxious. They improve their knowledge but still feel incomplete. They are always becoming something new but never arriving, because the movement was never grounded in acceptance. It was grounded in rejection. Rejection of the present self, rejection of the current state, rejection of what is. And when self-improvement grows out of rejection, it becomes endless. There is always something to fix, always something to upgrade, always something to correct. And the mind begins to build an identity around this. I am someone who is always improving. At first that sounds powerful, but over time it can become exhausting. Because if you are always improving, you're never resting. If you are always fixing, you are never allowing. If you are always becoming, you are never being. And this creates a subtle tension in your life. Even your rest becomes part of improvement. You do not rest because you feel like resting. You rest because it will make you more productive later. Even your peace becomes a strategy. Even your stillness becomes a tool. And slowly, everything you do becomes connected to becoming someone else. This is how desire hides. It no longer looks like craving, it looks like purpose. But if you look closely, you can feel the pressure behind it. A pressure that says, keep going, do more, be better, you are not there yet. And that pressure never says, you are enough now. Because if it did, the whole structure would begin to fall apart. This is not a call to stop improving your life. It is a call to see clearly where your improvement is coming from. Because there is a kind of growth that is gentle, a kind of growth that does not punish you, a kind of growth that does not whisper that you are lacking. This kind of growth begins from acceptance, from enough. It says, I am already whole, and from this wholeness I can expand. Not, I am broken, and I must fix myself before I deserve peace. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. When growth comes from enough, it feels lighter. There is curiosity instead of pressure. There is interest instead of fear. You explore new skills because they feel alive, not because you are trying to escape who you are. You build your life because it feels meaningful, not because you are trying to prove your worth. And when things do not go as planned, you do not collapse, because your value was never tied to the outcome. But when desire hides inside self-improvement, failure becomes heavy, because it feels like confirmation. Confirmation that you are still not enough. Confirmation that you need to try harder. And so the cycle continues. More effort, more pressure, more expectation, less peace. There is also another layer to this. Desire disguised as self-improvement often creates comparison. You begin to measure yourself constantly, where you are, where others are, how far you have come, how far you still need to go. And comparison keeps the mind busy. It keeps it looking outward instead of inward. It keeps it focused on distance instead of presence. And the more you compare, the more you feel behind, even when you are doing well, even when you are progressing, because there is always someone ahead, always someone doing more, always someone appearing more complete. And the mind uses that as fuel. Fuel to keep pushing, fuel to keep searching, fuel to avoid settling into enough. But this kind of movement has a cost. It disconnects you from your own pace. It disconnects you from your own path. It makes you forget that your life is not meant to look like someone else's. And more importantly, it keeps you from experiencing what is already here. Because your attention is always on what is next, what is missing, what needs to be improved. This is how even a good path can become a restless one. Even a meaningful journey can become heavy, because the heart is no longer in it. Only the pressure remains. And this pressure can become so normal that you stop noticing it. You think this is just how life works, that you must always be striving, always improving, always moving forward. But Buddhist wisdom gently questions this, not by telling you to stop growing, but by asking you to see the nature of your desire, to see whether it is rooted in clarity or in lack, to see whether it is peaceful or restless, to see whether it brings you closer to yourself or further away. Because not all desire is harmful. There is a natural movement in life, a natural unfolding, a natural curiosity. But when desire is mixed with identity, it becomes heavy, it becomes personal, it becomes something you depend on. You no longer want something, you need it to feel okay, and that is where suffering begins. Because anything you depend on for your sense of completeness becomes fragile. If it comes, you feel relief. If it does not, you feel pain, and so your peace becomes conditional, always waiting, always tied to outcomes, always uncertain. This is why desire, when misunderstood, creates instability. Not because wanting is wrong, but because attachment to wanting creates tension. And when that tension is hidden under the name of self-improvement, it becomes harder to see. It becomes something you protect, something you defend, something you believe you need. But the truth is, you do not need pressure to grow. You do not need dissatisfaction to move forward. You do not need to feel incomplete to become more. Life itself moves. Growth itself happens. You are already changing, learning, adapting, even without forcing it. And when you begin to trust that, something relaxes. You stop trying to control every step. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You stop trying to shape yourself into something acceptable. And instead, you begin to allow your life to unfold. This does not mean you sit still and do nothing. It means your action comes from a different place. A place that is not trying to escape. A place that is not trying to prove. A place that is not trying to fix. A place that is simply responding to life as it is. And from that place, your actions become more aligned, more natural, more effective. Because they are not clouded by fear. They are not distorted by comparison. They are not driven by the need to become someone else. They are an expression of who you already are. And this is where something beautiful happens. Self-improvement stops being a chase. It becomes a form of expression. You grow not because you have to, but because you want to explore. You learn not because you feel behind, but because you are curious. You change not because you are broken, but because you are alive. And this kind of growth does not create tension. It creates flow. It creates a sense of movement without pressure, a sense of direction without force. And in that space, desire loses its disguise. You begin to see it clearly, not as an enemy, not as something to destroy, but as something to understand. You begin to notice when it becomes tight, when it becomes urgent, when it becomes heavy, and instead of following it blindly, you pause. You ask, is this coming from enough or from lack? And that question alone creates awareness. It gives you choice. It allows you to step out of patterns that once felt automatic. And slowly, the relationship with desire changes. It becomes softer, less controlling, less demanding, more fluid. You can still want things, but you are not owned by those wants. You can still move forward, but you are not running from yourself. And that changes everything, because now life is not something you are constantly trying to improve. It is something you are learning to experience, fully, openly, without turning every moment into a project. And from this place, another quiet truth begins to emerge. Because if desire can hide so well, then what else have you been forcing without realizing it? What else have you been trying to control that may not need control at all? And what happens when you stop forcing life to move in your direction and instead allow it to arrive in its own way? And when you begin to see how desire can quietly shape your actions, another question starts to rise. What if not everything in your life needs to be pushed? What if some of the most important things you've been waiting for were never meant to be forced? There is a kind of strength that does not shout, does not rush, does not demand. It simply allows. And at first, that can feel unfamiliar, because you have been taught that effort is everything, that if you are not pushing, you are falling behind, that if you are not controlling, things will fall apart. But what if there is another way of moving through life? A way that does not come from pressure, but from trust. There is a quiet power in letting life arrive unforced, and most people never discover it because it looks too simple to be valuable. It does not come with urgency. It does not come with tension. It does not give you the feeling that something big is happening. And because of that, the mind often overlooks it. The mind is trained to respect struggle. It believes that if something requires effort, then it must be meaningful. It believes that if something comes easily, then it must not be important. But life does not always follow that logic. Some of the most meaningful moments arrive quietly, without announcement, without preparation, without force. They enter your life when there is space for them, and space only appears when you are not constantly trying to control everything. This is difficult to accept because control feels safe. When you control, you feel like you are managing life. You feel like you are directing outcomes. You feel like you are protecting yourself from uncertainty. But control has a hidden cost. It creates tension. It keeps the mind alert, tight and watchful, always adjusting, always checking, always correcting. And that tension makes it hard for anything natural to emerge. It is like trying to hold water in your hands by squeezing it. The tighter you grip, the less you hold. Letting life arrive unforced is not about doing nothing. It is about removing unnecessary force from what you are doing. It is about acting without tightening. It is about moving without pushing. It is about allowing things to unfold instead of trying to drag them into place. This does not mean you stop making decisions. It does not mean you stop working toward what matters to you. It means your actions are no longer filled with resistance. You begin to notice how much of your effort was not coming from clarity, but from fear. Fear of things not happening fast enough. Fear of missing an opportunity. Fear of being left behind. Fear of things going wrong. And because of that fear, you push harder. You try to secure outcomes. You try to control timing. You try to shape people and situations to fit your expectations. But life does not respond well to force. People do not open under pressure. Opportunities do not appear when you are tense and closed. Moments do not reveal themselves when you are too busy trying to get somewhere else. This is why letting life arrive unforced is powerful. It creates openness, and openness allows things to move toward you. Not because you made them happen, but because you are no longer blocking them. There is a difference between effort and force. Effort is natural. It flows. It responds to what is needed. Force is rigid. It resists what is happening. It tries to override reality. And when you operate from force, you are constantly fighting against something. Time, people, circumstances, even yourself. But when you move from effort without force, things feel different. You still act. You still engage. But there is less struggle inside your actions. You are not trying to bend everything to your will. You are working with what is available, and that creates a different kind of effectiveness. Because now you are not wasting energy on resistance. You are using your energy on what can actually move. There is also a deeper trust that begins to develop when you let life arrive unforced. A trust that things can unfold without constant interference. A trust that not everything needs to be managed. A trust that life has its own intelligence. This does not mean life will always give you what you want. But it does mean you are not fighting it every step of the way. And that changes your experience completely, because when you stop forcing, you start noticing. You notice the small shifts, the subtle opportunities, the natural timing of things. You begin to see that some things only appear when you are ready to receive them, not when you demand them. This is especially true in relationships. You cannot force connection. You cannot force understanding. You cannot force someone to see you in a certain way. You can try, you can push, you can explain, you can convince. But the more you force, the more resistance you create. Real connection happens when there is space, when people feel safe, when there is no pressure to be something other than what they are. And that space cannot exist when you are trying to control the outcome. The same applies to your inner life. You cannot force clarity. You cannot force healing. You cannot force the mind to become quiet. You can create conditions. You can sit. You can breathe. You can observe. But the actual shift happens when the pressure is removed, when you stop demanding that things change on your timeline and allow them to move at their own pace. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because it requires patience. It requires surrender. It requires letting go of the illusion that you can control everything. But it also brings a deep kind of relief. Because when you stop forcing, you are no longer carrying the weight of trying to manage the entire flow of your life. You are participating in it, not controlling it. And that participation feels lighter. There is also a kind of clarity that emerges when you stop forcing, because force often clouds your judgment. It makes you act from urgency instead of understanding. It makes you choose quickly instead of wisely. It makes you react instead of respond. But when you are not forcing, you can see more clearly. You can feel what is right. You can sense what is aligned. You can notice when something is not meant for you without trying to hold on to it anyway. And this saves you a lot of unnecessary struggle, because not everything is meant to be chased. Not everything is meant to be held. Not everything is meant to be forced into your life. Some things only make sense when they arrive naturally. And when you try to force them, they lose their meaning. They become heavy. They become complicated. They become something you have to maintain instead of something that supports you. Letting life arrive unforced also changes your relationship with time. You are no longer rushing constantly. You are no longer feeling like you are behind. You begin to understand that life is not a race to complete. It is a process to experience, and processes have their own rhythm, their own pace, their own unfolding. When you respect that pace, things feel smoother, not always easier, but more natural, less forced, less strained, more aligned. There is also a deeper level to this. When you stop forcing life, you begin to see how much of your suffering came from resisting what already is, not just chasing what is not there, but pushing against what is already present. Situations you do not like, emotions you do not want, circumstances you wish were different. And the more you resist, the more tension you create. But when you allow things to be as they are, without immediately trying to change them, something shifts. You are no longer adding extra weight to the situation. You are no longer turning discomfort into struggle. You are simply meeting what is there. And from that place, change becomes possible. Because now, you are not reacting blindly. You are responding with awareness. This is not passivity. This is presence. It is the ability to stay with what is happening without losing yourself in it. To act when action is needed. To wait when waiting is needed. To move when movement is clear. And to rest when rest is natural, without forcing any of it. And this way of living has a quiet strength. It does not need to prove itself. It does not need to rush. It does not need to control every outcome. It trusts the unfolding. It trusts the process. It trusts that not everything needs to be pushed into existence. And in that trust, life begins to feel different. More open, more fluid, more responsive. You begin to notice how things come together in ways you could not have planned, how opportunities appear at the right time, how clarity emerges when you stop chasing it, how connections deepen when you stop trying to control them. It is not magic, it is alignment. You are no longer moving against the flow. You are moving with it, and that makes everything smoother, not perfect, not free of challenges, but less resistant, less heavy, more natural. And this is where the quiet power reveals itself. It is not loud, it does not demand attention, but it changes everything. Because you are no longer exhausting yourself trying to make life happen. You are allowing life to meet you. And when you meet life without force, it meets you differently, with less resistance, with more openness, with more possibility. And as this begins to settle, another layer of understanding appears. Because when you stop forcing, you also begin to notice something else. Something that was always there, but hidden by your constant effort. The small, quiet gifts that life offers, the simple moments, the subtle opportunities, the things that do not look important at first glance, and yet they carry something essential. Because while you were busy searching for something bigger, you may have been missing what was already enough. And as you begin to stop forcing life, something subtle starts to come into view. You notice that life has been offering you small things all along. Quiet moments, simple connections, gentle opportunities. But there is a reason they often go unnoticed. Because the mind has been trained to look for something bigger, something louder, something more impressive, something that feels like it will finally change everything. And in that constant search for more, something important gets overlooked, not because it is hidden, but because it is too simple to match what the mind is expecting. There is a quiet blindness that happens when the mind is always hunting for something greater. It is not a physical blindness. You can still see, you can still hear, you can still move through your day, but your attention becomes selective. It filters out what feels ordinary. It ignores what does not look like progress. It dismisses what does not promise a dramatic change. And because of that, it begins to miss what is already meaningful. This is how life can feel empty even when it is full. Not because there is nothing there, but because the mind has decided that what is there is not enough. This pattern begins early. You are taught to aim higher, to want more, to never settle, to keep improving. And again, these ideas are not wrong. But when they become the only way you relate to life, they create a narrow view. You begin to believe that value only exists in what is bigger, that fulfillment only comes from what is next, that happiness must be earned through something significant, and so your attention keeps moving forward, always scanning, always comparing, always evaluating. It becomes difficult to sit with what is already here, because the mind says, "This is not it, keep going." And in doing so, it walks past countless small moments that could have brought peace. A quiet conversation, a simple meal, a moment of rest, a breath taken without pressure, a feeling of being okay, even briefly. These moments do not announce themselves. They do not demand your attention. They are gentle. And because they are gentle, they require presence to be noticed. But presence is exactly what the searching mind lacks. It is always somewhere else. Even when you are physically here, your attention is not. It is in the future, in what needs to happen, in what has not happened yet, in what you are still trying to become. And so, even when life gives you something good, you do not fully receive it. You touch it briefly, then move on. You taste it, then compare it. You experience it, then question it. Is this enough? Should I be doing something else? What's next? And just like that, the moment passes. Not because it was empty, but because it was not held. This is one of the quiet tragedies of the restless mind. It is surrounded by life, but rarely feels it. It is constantly moving, but rarely arrives. It is always reaching, but rarely receives. There is also another layer to this. When the mind is trained to look for bigger things, it begins to lose sensitivity to smaller ones. It becomes desensitized, like someone who listens to loud music all the time and can no longer hear soft sounds. Life becomes louder, faster, more intense, but less meaningful. Because meaning is often found in subtlety, in the details, in the spaces between things, in the moments that do not try to impress you. But when your attention is used to chasing intensity, these moments feel invisible. They do not register. They do not feel important. And so they are ignored. This creates a cycle. The more you ignore small moments, the more you feel like something is missing. And the more you feel like something is missing, the more you search for something bigger. And the bigger you search, the less you notice what is already present. This cycle can continue for years, even a lifetime, and it can make you feel like life is always just out of reach, always almost there, but never quite. But the truth is not that life is withholding something from you. It is that your attention has been trained to overlook what is already being given. This is why Buddhist wisdom places so much emphasis on awareness. Not as a concept, but as a practice, a returning, a coming back to what is actually happening, to what is already here without trying to make it something else. When you begin to slow down, even slightly, something shifts. Your attention becomes softer, less focused on the future, less driven by comparison. And in that softness, you begin to notice more. Things you missed before, the way your body feels when it is not tense, the way silence feels when it is not filled with noise, the way a simple moment can hold a quiet sense of completeness. At first, these things may seem small, almost too small to matter, but over time, they begin to accumulate. They begin to change how you experience your life, because now you are not waiting for something big to happen before you allow yourself to feel okay. You are finding small moments of okay within your day. And those moments build. They create a different rhythm, a different relationship with life. One that is not dependent on constant change, one that does not need everything to be perfect before it can be appreciated. There is also a kind of gratitude that begins to emerge naturally, not forced, not practiced as a task, but felt, because when you begin to notice what is already here, you cannot help but see that there is more than you thought, not in a dramatic sense, but in a real, grounded way. There is breath, there is awareness, there is the ability to feel, there is the ability to notice. There are moments of connection, even if brief. There are spaces of rest, even if small. And these things begin to matter, not because someone told you they should, but because you are actually experiencing them. And experience changes everything. Because what you experience directly becomes real, not as an idea, but as something you feel. And when something is felt, it no longer needs to be chased. It is already here. This is how the mind begins to shift, slowly, gently, not by force, but by exposure, by seeing what was previously overlooked. And as this happens, the need to constantly search begins to lose its intensity. Not completely at first, but enough to create space, enough to allow moments of stillness, enough to experience life without immediately turning it into something else. This is where the quiet gifts begin to appear more clearly, not because they suddenly arrived, but because you are finally able to see them. And these gifts are not always what you expect. They are not always solutions. They are not always answers. Sometimes they are simply moments of clarity, moments where the mind is not pulling you in 10 directions, moments where you feel grounded, even briefly, moments where you are not trying to become something else. These moments are easy to miss because they do not stand out, they do not demand attention, but they are important because they show you what is possible. They show you that peace does not always come from big changes. It can come from small shifts in attention, from being where you are instead of where you think you should be. And over time, these small shifts create a different experience of life, one that feels less rushed, less pressured, less dependent on constant improvement, more open, more available, more real. There is also a deeper understanding that begins to form, that what you need is not always what you expect, that life does not always deliver things in the way you imagine, that sometimes what you are looking for is already present in a different form. But if you are only looking for one specific version of it, you will miss it. This is why the mind can walk past what it needs while searching for something else. It has a picture of how things should look, and anything that does not match that picture is ignored. But life does not follow your pictures. It follows its own movement. And when you become open to that movement, you begin to receive more. Not because life is giving more, but because you are no longer filtering everything out. This is the quiet shift from scarcity to awareness, from chasing to noticing, from needing to receiving. And this shift changes how you move through the world. You are no longer just looking for the next thing. You are experiencing what is here. You are no longer waiting for something big to make your life meaningful. You are allowing small moments to carry meaning, and this creates a sense of richness. Not because your life has changed dramatically, but because your relationship with it has. And from this place, something else becomes possible, because when you are no longer blind to what is already here, you begin to see something even deeper. You begin to notice how much of your life was built around waiting. Waiting for something to happen, waiting for something to arrive, waiting for something to change. And that waiting has been shaping your experience more than you realized, because when you are always waiting, you are never fully here. And when you are never fully here, life feels incomplete. But what happens when that waiting begins to loosen? What happens when you stop asking the future to complete you? What happens when you stop treating the next moment as the solution to this one? That is where the next shift begins. Because the future has been carrying a weight it was never meant to hold, and letting go of that weight changes everything. And as you begin to notice the quiet gifts that were always here, something even deeper starts to shift. You realize that for a long time you were not just searching for something bigger, you were waiting for the future to fix what feels unfinished inside you. Waiting for the right moment to finally feel calm, complete, and at ease. And without noticing it, you placed a heavy responsibility on something that does not yet exist. Because the future became more than just time ahead. It became a promise. A silent agreement you made with yourself that says, when I get there, I will finally be okay. But what happens when that moment never arrives the way you expected? What happens when the future keeps moving just as you reach for it? There is a quiet habit in the mind that rarely gets questioned. It is the habit of postponing peace. It says, not now, later. Later, when things are more stable. Later, when you understand everything. Later, when your life looks the way you think it should. Later, when you feel more confident, more prepared, more complete. And because of this habit, the present moment becomes a waiting room. A place you pass through, not a place you live in. You wake up, but you are not fully here. You move through your day, but your attention is somewhere ahead. You go through conversations, tasks, and moments, but part of you is always looking beyond them. Always thinking, once this is done, then I can relax. But there is always another this, another task, another goal, another problem, another expectation, and so the relaxation never truly comes. It stays just out of reach. Not because it is unavailable, but because you have attached it to something that keeps moving. The future is not a stable place. It is always shifting. Every time you arrive at what you thought would bring peace, the mind creates a new condition, a new requirement, a new version of what enough should look like. And so you keep adjusting your life to match something that never stays still. This is how the mind keeps you in motion, not through force, but through hope. Hope that the next moment will solve what this one could not. Hope that the next achievement will remove the discomfort you feel now. Hope that the next version of yourself will finally feel complete. But this kind of hope has a hidden cost. It disconnects you from the only place where life is actually happening. Here, now. Because as long as you believe the future will save you, the present will never feel like enough. It will always feel like preparation, like something you must get through before you can finally arrive, and this creates a subtle form of suffering, not loud, not dramatic, but constant. A quiet dissatisfaction that follows you from moment to moment. Even when things are good, even when nothing is wrong, there is still a sense that something is missing, that something is not quite right yet. And that feeling is not coming from your life. It is coming from the belief that your life is not complete until something else happens. This is the moment that needs to be seen clearly. The moment where you realize that the future cannot carry what you have placed on it. It cannot hold your peace. It cannot hold your worth. It cannot hold your sense of completeness, because the future is not something you can experience. It is something you imagine, and imagination, while powerful, is not a stable foundation for peace. When you begin to see this, something begins to loosen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently. You start to question the habit of waiting. You start to notice how often you say, "Once this happens, then I will be okay." And you begin to ask, why not now? Not in a forced way, not as a demand, but as an honest question. What is preventing you from feeling okay in this moment? Not from having everything solved, but from allowing yourself to rest, even briefly. Often the answer is not what you think. It is not the external situation. It is not the lack of something. It is the resistance. The belief that this moment is not enough. The refusal to be with what is here. And when that resistance softens, even slightly, something changes. You begin to feel a small sense of relief, not because everything is fixed, but because you are no longer pushing against reality. You are no longer demanding that life be different before you allow yourself to breathe. And that breath becomes important because it is real. It is here. It is not in the future. It does not depend on conditions. It is simply happening. And when you return to something as simple as your breath, you begin to anchor yourself in the present, not as an idea, but as an experience. You begin to feel your body, your surroundings, the fact that you are here, alive, aware, and in that awareness, something becomes clear. You do not need the future to exist. You do not need the future to breathe. You do not need the future to feel this moment. And while this does not solve everything, it changes your relationship with everything. Because now, you are not placing all your hope in something that is not here. You are beginning to find stability in what is. This does not mean you stop planning. It does not mean you stop caring about your future. It means you stop using the future as an escape from the present. You stop treating it as the place where your life will finally begin. Because your life is already happening, right now, in ways that are easy to overlook. And when you stop begging the future to save you, you begin to reclaim the present. You begin to see that this moment, even with its imperfections, is not something to run from. It is something to meet, to experience, to be in. And from that place, your actions become different. You still move forward, you still make decisions, you still build your life. But now, you are not doing it from desperation. You are not trying to escape your current state. You are responding to it. You are working with it, and that changes the quality of your actions. They become more grounded, more clear, more aligned, because they are not being rushed by the need to fix everything immediately. There is also a deeper sense of patience that begins to grow. Not the kind of patience that feels forced or passive, but a natural patience that comes from understanding that not everything needs to happen right now. You begin to trust timing, not blindly, but with awareness. You see that some things unfold when the conditions are right, not when you push them, and this reduces a lot of inner pressure, because you are no longer trying to control every outcome. You are allowing things to develop at their own pace, in their own way. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become balanced. You care, but you are not consumed. You act, but you are not attached to immediate results. You plan, but you are not living entirely in your plans. And this balance creates a different kind of freedom. Because now, your well-being is not entirely dependent on what happens next. It is rooted in your ability to be present, to meet life as it is, to respond without losing yourself. And this is where something important happens. The future loses its power over you, not because it disappears, but because you are no longer using it as your only source of hope. You begin to see that hope can exist in the present. in small ways, in subtle ways, in the simple act of being here without needing everything to be perfect. And this kind of hope is stable because it is not based on expectation. It is based on awareness. You are not hoping that something will finally make you whole. You are recognizing that you are already here, already alive, already capable of experiencing this moment. And that recognition is enough to create a sense of grounding. From that ground, everything changes. Your relationship with time becomes softer. You are not rushing through your days. You are not constantly checking what comes next. You are not measuring your life only by what you achieve. You begin to value what is happening now, even if it is simple, even if it is quiet, even if it is not what you expected. And this changes how life feels. It becomes less like a race, less like a problem to solve, more like something to experience, something to be part of, something that unfolds as you move through it. And as this understanding deepens, something else begins to appear. A sense of responsibility, not the heavy kind, not the kind that creates pressure, but a gentle awareness that your life is not waiting for the future to begin. It is happening now, and how you meet this moment matters, not because it determines everything, but because it shapes your experience. You can meet it with resistance, or you can meet it with openness. You can meet it with urgency, or you can meet it with presence. And each choice creates a different feeling, a different way of moving through life. And this is where the real shift happens, not in what you have, not in what you achieve, but in how you relate to what is already here. When you stop begging the future to save you, you begin to save yourself from unnecessary suffering. You begin to see that peace is not waiting ahead. It is available now, in the absence of resistance, in the presence of awareness, in the simple act of being here without needing something else to complete you. And this does not mean your life stops changing. It means your experience of life becomes more stable, more grounded, less dependent on conditions. And from this place, you can still move forward. But you are no longer chasing a version of life that will finally make everything okay. You are participating in life as it unfolds, and that participation feels different. It feels real. It feels present. It feels enough. And as this becomes clearer, another quiet understanding begins to emerge. Because when you are no longer chasing the future, you become more available to what is here, available to what is coming, available to opportunities that do not announce themselves loudly. And this availability changes how life meets you, because what you are open to, you can receive, and what you are always running past, you will never see. And as you stop begging the future to complete you, something quiet begins to open. You are no longer running ahead of your own life. You are no longer reaching past what is here, and in that slowing down, something unexpected happens. You become available, not just physically present, but inwardly open. Open to what is already here, open to what is quietly arriving, open to what you once overlooked. And this openness is not passive, it is powerful in a way that is easy to miss. Because when you are not grasping, you are not closing your hands around one outcome. You are allowing life to meet you in more than one way. There is a subtle movement in the mind that holds tightly to what it wants. It reaches, it clings, it tries to secure. It says, "This is what I need, this is how it must happen." And once it decides that, everything else becomes less visible. Anything that does not match that expectation is dismissed, ignored, overlooked, because the mind is focused on one specific version of how life should unfold. This is grasping. It feels like clarity, but often it is rigidity. It feels like determination, but often it is attachment. And attachment narrows your vision. It makes you see less, not more. Because now you are not open to life. You are only open to one outcome, and if that outcome does not appear, you feel blocked. You feel like nothing is happening. You feel like life is not responding, but the truth is, life may be responding in ways you are not allowing yourself to see. This is why non-grasping is so important, not because wanting is wrong, but because holding too tightly prevents you from receiving anything outside your expectation. Non-grasping does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop closing yourself around a single possibility. It means your hands are open, and open hands can receive. There is a difference between reaching and being available. Reaching is tense, it is focused, it is narrow, it is driven by the belief that something specific must happen. Availability is different, it is relaxed, it is aware, it is wide, it allows multiple possibilities to exist, and because of that, it can notice more. When you are not grasping, your attention softens. You are not forcing your way forward. You are observing, listening, responding. And in that state, opportunities begin to appear in a different way, not as dramatic events, but as subtle openings. A conversation that leads somewhere unexpected. A small idea that grows into something meaningful. A moment of clarity that changes your direction. These things are easy to miss when the mind is fixed on one path. But when you are open, they become visible. And visibility is what makes opportunity real. Because an opportunity you cannot see might as well not exist. Non-grasping increases your ability to see, not because it creates more opportunities, but because it removes the filter that was blocking them. You are no longer looking for one specific answer. You are noticing what is actually here, and what is here often carries more potential than what you imagined. There is also a kind of calm that comes with non-grasping. You are not tense. You are not forcing. You are not trying to make things happen immediately. And that calm makes your presence different. People feel it. Situations respond to it. Because tension creates resistance. When you are tight, people feel pressure. When you are pushing, situations become rigid. But when you are open, things flow more naturally. Conversations feel easier, decisions feel clearer, movements feel less forced, and this creates space for things to unfold. There is also a deeper intelligence in non-grasping, because when you are not attached to one outcome, you can adapt, you can adjust, you can respond to what is actually happening instead of what you expected to happen. And this flexibility is powerful because life rarely follows a straight line. It moves, it shifts, it changes. And if you are too rigid, you break under that movement. But if you are open, you move with it. You find new paths, new directions, new possibilities. And those possibilities often lead you somewhere better than what you were originally chasing. But you would never reach them if you were holding too tightly to your first idea. This is one of the quiet gifts of non-grasping. It allows life to surprise you, not in a random way, but in a natural way, because you are no longer controlling every step. You are participating in a process that is bigger than your plans. There is also a shift in how you relate to success. When you are grasping, success feels like something you must capture, something you must secure, something that defines your worth. But when you are not grasping, success becomes something you can engage with without depending on it. You can pursue something fully, but you are not destroyed if it does not happen. You can aim for something, but you are not blind to other possibilities along the way. And this makes your actions more effective, because they are not clouded by desperation. They are clear, focused, responsive. There is less fear behind them. And fear often distorts action. It makes you rush. It makes you choose from urgency. It makes you ignore what does not match your expectation. But without that fear, your decisions become more grounded, more thoughtful, more aligned. And that alignment increases the chances that what you do will actually work, because you are working with reality, not against it. There is also a kind of freedom in non-grasping that changes how you experience life. You are not constantly measuring whether things are going your way. You are not constantly checking if you are getting closer to your goal. You are simply moving, experiencing, responding. And that makes the journey itself more meaningful, not just the outcome. Because when you are grasping, the journey is often something you want to get through, something you tolerate until you reach what you want. But when you are not grasping, the journey becomes part of the experience, something you can engage with fully, something you can learn from, something that has value on its own. And this creates a different kind of satisfaction, not the kind that comes from finally getting something, but the kind that comes from being fully present in what you are doing. And this satisfaction is more stable, because it does not depend on external results. It comes from how you are relating to your life. There is also an emotional shift that happens. When you are grasping, you are often anxious, because you are trying to control something that is not fully in your control. You are waiting for something to happen. You are hoping it will go a certain way. And that creates tension. But when you are not grasping, that tension reduces. You still care, but you are not holding everything so tightly. You are allowing things to unfold, and that creates a sense of ease, not because everything is perfect, but because you are not adding extra pressure to it. This ease allows you to stay more grounded, even when things are uncertain. And uncertainty is where most opportunities exist, because new things often come from unknown situations, from unexpected turns, from moments that are not planned. But if you are too attached to what you expect, you will avoid those moments. You will resist them. You will try to bring everything back to what feels familiar, and in doing so, you will miss what could have been. Non-grasping allows you to stay present in uncertainty, to explore it, to move through it, to see what it offers, without immediately trying to control it. And that openness is where growth happens. Not forced growth, not pressured improvement, but natural development. The kind that unfolds as you engage with life fully. There is also a deeper trust that begins to form, a trust that you do not need to control everything to be okay. A trust that you can meet what comes. A trust that you are capable of responding even when things are not clear. And this trust reduces fear, because fear often comes from the belief that you cannot handle what might happen. But when you trust yourself, that belief weakens. You are less afraid of the unknown, less afraid of change, less afraid of things not going exactly as planned. And this makes you more open, more available, more able to engage with life as it is. And when you are available, things can reach you. Opportunities, connections, ideas. They can meet you, because you are not closed off. You are not filtering everything through a narrow expectation. You are open to what is actually happening, and this openness is what allows life to move through you, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, natural way, where things come and go without being forced, where opportunities appear and you are able to recognize them, where paths open and you are able to walk them. And this is the quiet power of non-grasping. It does not create noise, it does not demand attention, but it changes everything, because it changes how you relate to what is happening, and how you relate determines what you experience. When you are grasping, you experience tension, limitation, frustration. When you are open, you experience possibility, clarity, flow, and from that place, life feels different, not because it has changed completely, but because you are meeting it differently. And as this continues to unfold, something even more subtle becomes clear. Because when you stop grasping, you begin to notice how much of your life was shaped by trying to hold on to outcomes, to identities, to expectations. And what happens when you begin to release those? What happens when you stop trying to hold everything together? What happens when you allow things to move, to change, to unfold without gripping them? That is where another layer begins. Because not everything you release is lost. Some things become clearer when you stop holding them so tightly, and some things can only be held when your hands are no longer closed. And as you begin to loosen your grip, another question rises quietly. If you stop holding so tightly, are you losing control, or are you finally seeing clearly? Because from the outside, letting go can look like weakness. It can look like you are stepping back. It can look like you are no longer trying. But inside, something very different is happening. There is a kind of strength that does not fight, a kind of clarity that does not resist. And yet, many people confuse this with giving up. They think that if they stop forcing, they will fall behind. That if they stop pushing, they will lose everything. That if they surrender, they will become passive, powerless, and directionless. But that confusion keeps them trapped in struggle. Because surrender is not what they think it is. There is a deep difference between surrender and giving up, but the mind often cannot see it at first. Giving up comes from defeat. It carries heaviness. It feels like collapse. It says, I cannot do this anymore, so I will stop. There is frustration in it. There is disappointment. There is a sense of closing down. When you give up, you turn away from life. You withdraw. You stop engaging. You stop caring. You create distance between yourself and what is happening. Surrender is not like that. Surrender does not come from weakness. It comes from understanding. It says, I see what is happening, and I will not fight what I cannot control. There is no collapse in it. There is openness. There is presence. When you surrender, you do not turn away from life. You turn toward it. You meet it as it is, without trying to force it into a different shape. This is what makes it powerful, because it removes unnecessary struggle. It allows you to act where action is possible and to release where control is not. But the mind resists this because the mind wants certainty. It wants control. It wants to believe that if it pushes hard enough, it can shape everything. And when that belief is challenged, it feels uncomfortable. It feels like loss. It feels like something is being taken away. But what is actually being removed is the illusion of control. And that illusion carries a heavy burden, because when you believe you must control everything, you feel responsible for everything, every outcome, every reaction, every result. And that responsibility creates tension. It creates pressure. It creates fear. Because you are trying to manage something that is too large to manage completely. Surrender releases that burden. Not by making you careless, but by making you clear. You begin to see what is within your reach and what is not. You begin to act where you can and let go where you cannot. And this creates balance, because now your energy is not scattered. It is focused. It is grounded. It is aligned with reality. There is also an emotional difference between surrender and giving up. Giving up often feels like shutting down. You disconnect. You protect yourself by withdrawing. You say, it does not matter anymore, even when it does. There is a numbness in it, a kind of quiet resignation. Surrender feels different. It is not numb, it is aware. You feel what is happening. You do not deny it. You do not avoid it, but you do not fight it either. You allow it. And in that allowing, something softens. Not because the situation has changed, but because your relationship with it has. There is less resistance, less inner conflict, less struggle. And this creates space. Space to breathe, space to think clearly, space to respond instead of react. This space is what makes surrender powerful, because without it, your actions are often driven by emotion, fear, anger, frustration, desperation, and actions driven by these states tend to create more problems. But when there is space, your actions become more intentional, more thoughtful, more effective, because they are not coming from a place of chaos. They are coming from clarity. There is also a deeper level to surrender that is often overlooked. It is the acceptance of uncertainty, the recognition that not everything can be predicted, not everything can be planned, not everything can be controlled. And instead of resisting this, you allow it. You move with it. You trust that you can handle what comes, even if you do not know exactly what it will be. This trust is important because it replaces fear with openness. It replaces tension with flexibility. It allows you to move through life without needing every step to be certain. And this makes you more resilient. Because resilience is not about controlling everything. It is about adapting to what happens. And adaptation requires surrender. It requires the ability to let go of what you thought should happen and to work with what is actually happening. There is also a shift in how you see failure. When you are attached, failure feels personal. It feels like something is wrong with you. It feels like you have lost something important. But when you surrender, failure becomes information. It becomes feedback. It shows you what did not work without defining who you are. And this allows you to continue without carrying the weight of judgment, without losing your sense of self, without turning every mistake into a reason to stop. Because surrender does not stop you from trying. It removes the pressure of needing everything to go perfectly. And this makes your effort more sustainable, more natural, more aligned. There is also a freedom that comes with surrender. A freedom from constant tension, from constant control, from constant resistance. You are no longer fighting every moment. You are no longer trying to make everything fit your expectations. You are allowing life to move, and in that movement, you find your place. Not by forcing it, but by being present to it. This does not mean you become passive. It means your actions come from a different place, not from fear, not from urgency, but from awareness. You still act, you still choose, you still engage, but you do so without gripping, without forcing, without demanding that life obey you. And this creates a different kind of strength, a quiet strength, one that does not need to prove itself, one that does not need to control everything to feel secure, one that can stand in uncertainty without collapsing. This is the strength of surrender. And it is often misunderstood, because it does not look dramatic, it does not create noise, it does not draw attention, but it is steady. And that steadiness is powerful, because it allows you to remain grounded, even when things are changing, even when things are uncertain, even when things are not going as planned. And from that grounded place, you can move more effectively, more clearly, more freely. There is also a deeper connection that forms when you surrender. A connection with life as it is, not as you want it to be, not as you imagine it should be, but as it actually is. And this connection brings a kind of peace, not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from no longer fighting reality, from no longer creating unnecessary resistance, from no longer turning every situation into a problem to solve. You begin to see that life is not something you need to control. It is something you are already part of. And this changes your perspective. You are no longer outside of life, trying to manage it. You are inside it, moving with it, responding to it, experiencing it. And this experience becomes richer, more real, more grounded, because it is not filtered through constant resistance. It is direct, immediate, present. And this presence is where clarity lives. Because when you are present, you can see what is happening, without distortion, without assumption, without fear shaping your perception. And this clarity allows you to make better choices, not because you are forcing them, but because you are seeing clearly. And clear seeing leads to clear action. This is the natural flow of surrender. It is not passive, it is not weak, it is not giving up. It is aligning with what is real. And from that alignment, everything becomes more natural, more fluid, more responsive. There is also a deep sense of relief that comes with surrender, a release of the need to hold everything together. a release of the pressure to control every outcome, a release of the belief that everything depends on your effort alone. And this relief creates space. Space for rest, space for clarity, space for life to unfold, without constant interference. And in that space, something else begins to emerge, a sense of trust. Not blind trust, but grounded trust. Trust in your ability to respond. Trust in the process of life. Trust that not everything needs to be forced. And this trust allows you to move forward without fear dominating your actions, without urgency controlling your decisions, without resistance shaping your experience. And from that place, your life begins to feel different, less heavy, less pressured, more open, more aligned. And this alignment is what allows things to flow, not perfectly, not without challenge, but with less struggle, with more clarity, with more ease. And as this understanding deepens, something else becomes clear. Because when you stop fighting what is happening, you begin to notice something important. You begin to see how stillness plays a role in everything. How not moving can sometimes be more powerful than pushing. How quiet can reveal what noise hides. And this leads into something even deeper, because what you cannot hold with restlessness may become available in stillness. And as surrender begins to settle within you, something quiet becomes more noticeable. The urge to keep moving fades, even if just a little. The need to constantly adjust, fix, and control begins to loosen. And in that space, something unfamiliar starts to appear. Stillness. Not the kind that feels forced or empty, but a stillness that feels alive. A stillness that holds something you have been searching for without knowing it. Because for a long time, you believed that movement would bring you closer to what you need. But what if movement was the very thing keeping it out of reach? There is a deep misunderstanding about stillness. Most people think stillness means doing nothing. They think it is passive, unproductive, even a waste of time. Because the world teaches you that progress comes from action, from speed, from constant movement. And so the idea of being still can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like you are falling behind, like you are not doing enough, like you are missing something important. But stillness is not the absence of life. It is the absence of unnecessary movement. It is what remains when the mind is not constantly pulling you in different directions. And in that space, something important begins to happen. You become able to hold what restlessness cannot. Restlessness is scattered. It jumps from one thought to another, one desire to another, one idea to another. It cannot stay. It cannot settle. It cannot remain long enough to receive anything fully. It is always moving, always reaching, always looking ahead. And because of that, it misses what is trying to arrive. Stillness is different. It stays. It allows. It holds. It does not rush to the next thing. It does not interrupt the moment. It lets things unfold in their own time. And because of that, it becomes a place where things can land, where clarity can appear, where understanding can deepen, where opportunity can take shape. There are things in life that cannot be forced. They require space. They require time. They require a certain quietness to emerge. You cannot rush insight. You cannot force connection. You cannot demand clarity. These things appear when the conditions are right, and stillness creates those conditions, because stillness removes the noise that blocks them. It removes the pressure that distorts them. It removes the urgency that pushes them away. When you are still, your awareness sharpens, not in a tense way, but in a soft, open way. You begin to notice things you missed before, subtle shifts, quiet signals, small openings. And these small openings often lead to something bigger. But they can only be seen when you are not distracted, when your attention is not constantly moving. This is why restlessness cannot hold what stillness attracts. Restlessness is always leaving. Stillness is always receiving. When you are restless, Even if something good appears, you cannot stay with it. Your mind moves on, your attention shifts, your focus breaks, and the moment passes. But when you are still, you remain. You give the moment your full presence, and in that presence the moment reveals more. It deepens, it expands, it becomes something you can fully experience. There is also a kind of trust that comes with stillness. A trust that you do not need to chase everything, that not everything needs to be pursued aggressively, that some things will come when you are ready. And this trust reduces the pressure you feel, because you are no longer trying to control every outcome. You are allowing things to unfold, and that allowance creates space. Space for life to move naturally, space for things to connect in ways you could not have planned, space for opportunities to appear without being forced. This does not mean you stop acting. It means your action becomes more intentional, more focused, more aligned, because it is not driven by urgency. It is guided by clarity, and clarity often comes from stillness. When the mind is constantly moving, it is hard to see clearly. Thoughts overlap, emotions mix, reactions happen quickly. But when the mind becomes still, even for a moment, everything slows down. You can see what is actually happening. Not what you fear, not what you assume, but what is real. And from that place, your decisions improve, your actions become more precise, your responses become more thoughtful. Because they are not rushed, they are not reactive. They come from understanding. There is also a deeper level to this. Stillness allows you to connect with yourself, not the version of you that is constantly doing, but the version of you that simply is, the one that exists beneath all the effort, beneath all the thinking, beneath all the trying. And this connection is important, because without it, your actions can become disconnected. You can do many things but not feel aligned with them. You can move quickly but not know where you are going. You can achieve things but still feel empty. Stillness brings you back to what matters, back to what feels true, back to what is real for you. And from that place, your life begins to feel more grounded, more stable, more connected, because you are no longer moving from confusion. You are moving from awareness. There is also a kind of attraction that happens in stillness, not in a mystical sense, but in a natural one. When you are calm, people feel it. When you are grounded, situations respond differently. When you are present, conversations deepen. Because stillness creates safety, it creates openness, it allows others to relax, it allows things to flow. But when you are restless, that restlessness spreads. It creates tension. It creates pressure. It makes interactions feel rushed. And that affects what you receive, because people respond to your energy. Situations respond to your presence. And stillness changes that presence. It makes it more inviting, more open, more stable. And this stability allows things to connect, to align, to grow. There is also a patience that comes with stillness, not forced patience, but natural patience, the kind that does not rush outcomes, the kind that understands that some things take time. And this patience is important, because many opportunities require timing. They cannot be forced. They cannot be rushed. They appear when the conditions are right. And stillness allows you to wait without frustration, to remain open without tension, to be present without needing immediate results. This makes you more receptive, more available, more aligned with how life actually works. There is also a shift in how you experience time. When you are restless, time feels fast, rushed, never enough. You feel like you are always catching up, always trying to keep pace. But when you are still, time feels different, slower, more spacious, more available. And in that space, you can experience more. You can notice more. You can engage more deeply, because you are not rushing through your life. You are living it fully, presently. without constantly looking ahead. This changes everything, because life is not happening in the future, it is happening now. And stillness brings you into that now, without force, without effort, just by removing what was pulling you away. There is also a deeper understanding that begins to form, that not everything needs to be chased, that some things come when you are ready to receive them. And readiness is not created by force, it is created by presence, by awareness, by being here. And when you are here, fully, without distraction, without resistance, without urgency, you become ready, not because you prepared perfectly, but because you are open. And openness is what allows life to meet you. There are things that cannot enter a restless mind, because there is no space, no stillness, no place for them to land. But in a still mind there is room for insight, room for connection, room for opportunity, and that room is what attracts what you need, not in a magical way, but in a natural way, because what you can hold, you can receive, and stillness allows you to hold, to stay, to be present long enough for something to unfold. This is why stillness is powerful, not because it changes the world instantly, but because it changes how you relate to the world. And that relationship determines what you experience. When you are restless, you experience tension. When you are still, you experience clarity. When you are restless, you miss what is subtle. When you are still, you notice what matters. And over time, this noticing becomes a way of living, a way of being, where you are not constantly chasing, not constantly moving, but present, aware, open. And in that openness, life begins to meet you differently, not because it has changed, but because you have. And as this becomes clearer, something else begins to reveal itself, because once you can be still, once you can allow life to arrive, once you can hold what comes without rushing away, there is one more step, not about stopping, not about holding, but about acting, and then letting go. And as stillness begins to anchor you, another truth comes into view. You realize that being still does not mean you stop acting. Life still asks something of you. There are choices to make, steps to take, words to speak, paths to walk. But now the question changes. If you can act without force, if you can remain still without grasping, then how do you move without losing that peace? Because this is where many people get pulled back into tension. They find calm, and then action disturbs it. They find clarity, and then outcomes begin to control them again. And slowly, the old pattern returns, trying, pushing, holding on. But there is another way to act, a way that does not destroy your stillness, a way that allows you to move without losing yourself in the result. There is a quiet art in doing what needs to be done and then letting go of what happens next. Not because you do not care, but because you understand what is yours and what is not. This is not something the mind accepts easily, because the mind wants certainty. It wants to know that what you do will lead to a specific result. It wants guarantees. It wants control over outcomes. And so it holds on. It plans, adjusts, predicts, rechecks, and replays. It keeps returning to the same question. Will this work? Will this go the way I want? Will this give me what I need? And in doing so, it never rests, because outcomes are never fully in your hands. You can influence them. You can move toward them. You can prepare for them. But you cannot fully control them. There are too many factors, too many variables, too many things outside your reach. And when you try to control all of that, you create tension. You carry a weight that does not belong to you. The sacred art is learning where your role ends and where life begins. Your role is to act, to show up, to give your attention, to make your efforts sincere, to be present in what you are doing. But once that is done, something must be released. The need to control the outcome, the need to secure a specific result, the the need to guarantee success. This release is not failure, it is alignment, because now you are not overstepping your role. You are not trying to manage what cannot be managed. You are allowing life to respond in its own way, in its own time. This changes the feeling of action, because now you are not acting from pressure, you are acting from clarity. You are not acting to prove something. You are acting because it feels right to act. And that creates a different kind of movement, one that is steady, one that is grounded, one that is not shaken by immediate results. There is also a freedom in this way of acting, because when you release the outcome, you release the fear attached to it, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of things not going as planned. These fears come from attachment to results, from the belief that your worth is tied to what happens next. But when you let go of that attachment, those fears lose their grip. You can still care about the result, but you are not controlled by it. You can still hope for a certain outcome, but you are not broken if it does not happen. And this makes your actions more powerful, because they are not clouded by anxiety. They are clear, focused, present. There is also a deeper level of trust that develops. Not blind trust, not passive hope, but a grounded understanding that life is not entirely in your control. And that is okay, because you can handle what comes. You can respond, you can adapt, you can continue, without needing everything to go exactly as planned. This trust allows you to move forward without hesitation, not because you are certain, but because you are open. Open to what happens, open to what unfolds, open to learning from whatever comes. And this openness makes you more resilient, because you are not tied to one outcome. You are not dependent on one result. You are able to move through different situations without losing your center. There is also a shift in how you experience effort. When you are attached to outcomes, effort feels heavy. It feels like something you must push through, something that drains you, something that carries pressure. But when you release the outcome, effort feels different. It becomes lighter, more natural, more aligned with what you are doing. You are not forcing yourself. You are engaging, and engagement feels different from pressure. It feels alive. It feels connected. It feels meaningful, because you are present in the process, not lost in the result. This also changes how you experience success. When you are attached, success feels like relief. A release of tension, a moment where you finally feel okay. But that relief is temporary, because the mind quickly moves to the next thing, the next goal, the next outcome, and the cycle begins again. But when you are not attached, success feels like appreciation. You can enjoy it, you can acknowledge it, but you do not cling to it. You do not need it to define you. And this allows you to experience it more fully, without fear of losing it, without pressure to maintain it. There is also a deeper peace in this way of living, because you are no longer constantly evaluating your life based on results. You are not measuring your worth by what happens. You are not turning every action into a test. You are simply doing what needs to be done and allowing the rest to unfold. This creates a sense of balance between effort and release, between action and stillness, between movement and acceptance. And this balance is what keeps your peace intact, because you are not swinging between extremes. You are not pushing too hard, and you are not withdrawing completely. You are moving with awareness. There is also a humility that comes with releasing the outcome, a recognition that you are part of a larger process, that your actions matter, but they are not the only factor, that life has its own flow, its own intelligence. And when you respect that, you move differently. You are not trying to dominate the process. You are participating in it. And participation feels different from control. It is more flexible, more responsive, more aligned, because you are working with what is happening, not against it. This also changes how you relate to uncertainty. When you are attached to outcomes, uncertainty feels threatening because it means things may not go your way. But when you release outcomes, uncertainty becomes space. Space for possibilities, space for different paths, space for unexpected growth. And this makes you more adaptable, more open, more willing to explore without needing everything to be certain. There is also a deeper connection between this and stillness, because releasing the outcome requires stillness. It requires the ability to sit with not knowing, to be present without needing immediate answers, to remain grounded even when things are unclear. And this is not easy, but it becomes easier with practice. The more you allow things to unfold without forcing them, the more you begin to trust the process. The more you act without gripping the result, the more you see that life continues, that things move, that outcomes happen, even without your constant control. And this builds confidence, not in controlling everything, but in your ability to navigate whatever comes. And this confidence is stable, because it is not based on external success. It is based on internal understanding. You know your role, you know your limits, you know what you can influence, and you know what you must release. This clarity removes a lot of confusion, because you are no longer trying to do everything. You are focusing on what matters and letting go of what does not belong to you. This also creates a sense of integrity, because you are acting from your values, not from fear, not from pressure, but from what feels true. And this makes your actions more meaningful, because they are aligned with who you are, not driven by what you hope to gain. There is also a quiet satisfaction in this way of living, not the kind that comes from achieving something, but the kind that comes from knowing you showed up fully, that you did your part, that you were present, that you acted with clarity. And that is enough, because your role is not to control the entire story. Your role is to play your part well. And when you do that, something relaxes. You no longer carry the weight of everything. You no longer feel responsible for every outcome. You are simply participating, and participation is lighter. It allows you to engage without being overwhelmed, to care without being consumed, to act without losing yourself. And this is where peace and action meet, not as opposites, but as complements. You can be still inside while moving outside. You can act fully while remaining unattached. You can care deeply without holding tightly. And this balance is what creates a sustainable way of living, one that does not burn you out, one that does not pull you into constant tension, one that allows you to move through life with clarity and ease. And as this becomes part of your experience, something else begins to unfold. Because when you act without gripping outcomes, you begin to see how much of your suffering came from holding on to results, holding on to expectations, holding on to how things should be. And what happens when you release even more? What happens when you stop holding not just outcomes, but the dreams themselves in a tight, demanding way? What happens when you allow even your desires to exist without turning them into sources of pressure? That is where another layer begins, because even the things you want can become heavy when you hold them too tightly. And as you begin to act without gripping the outcome, something even more delicate comes into view. You start to notice that it is not just outcomes that create tension, it is the way you hold your dreams. Because even the most beautiful desires, even the ones that feel right, meaningful, and full of life, can quietly turn heavy. Not because they are wrong, but because of how tightly they are held. There is a difference between having a dream and becoming attached to it, and that difference is often the line between peace and suffering. There is something natural about wanting to grow, wanting to love, wanting to create, wanting to experience life more deeply. These desires are not the problem. They are part of being alive. They give direction, they give energy, they give movement. But something changes when desire turns into attachment. It stops being light, it becomes tight. Instead of guiding you, it begins to control you. Instead of inspiring you, it begins to pressure you. And slowly, something that once felt meaningful begins to feel heavy. This is how good dreams can turn into suffering. Not because the dream is wrong, but because you begin to believe that you need it in order to feel complete. You stop seeing it as something you can move toward. You begin to see it as something you must have. And that shift changes everything, because now your peace is no longer within you. It is placed outside, in something that has not happened yet, something that may or may not happen. And because of that, your emotional state becomes unstable. If you feel like you are getting closer to the dream, you feel hopeful. If something blocks your path, you feel frustrated. If things do not go as planned, you feel anxious. If it feels far away, you feel empty. Your inner state becomes tied to something uncertain, and uncertainty creates tension. There is also a constant pressure that comes with attachment, a feeling that you must keep pushing, that you cannot slow down, that you cannot rest, because if you do, you might lose the chance. You might fall behind, you might miss something important, and so even something beautiful becomes a source of stress. Even something meaningful becomes something you fear losing. This is the quiet trap of attachment. It makes you believe that what you love must be held tightly. But in holding tightly, you lose the very freedom that made it beautiful in the first place. There is also a deeper layer to this. Attachment often brings fear. Fear of not achieving the dream. Fear of losing it once you have it. Fear of not being enough for it. Fear of it not fulfilling you the way you expect. And these fears do not disappear when the dream is achieved. They often grow stronger. Because now there is something to protect, something to maintain, something to hold on to. And holding on creates tension. You begin to worry about keeping what you have. You begin to fear change. You begin to resist anything that threatens your sense of security. And this resistance creates suffering, because life does not stay still. Things change, situations shift, people evolve, and when you are attached, you fight that change. You try to hold things as they are. You try to keep everything in place. But that effort creates exhaustion, because you are trying to stop something that is always moving. There is also a subtle disappointment that can come with attachment, because no matter how beautiful a dream is, it cannot fulfill everything you expect from it. The mind often builds an image, an idea of how things will feel, how complete you will be, how everything will finally make sense. But reality is different. It is more complex, more layered, more human. And when reality does not match the image, there is a gap, a quiet disappointment. Not because the dream failed, but because it was carrying a weight it was never meant to carry. It was expected to solve something deeper, something internal, something that cannot be fixed by external outcomes. And this is where suffering grows, because now you are not just dealing with reality. You are dealing with the difference between what is and what you imagined, and that difference creates tension. There is also a loss of presence that comes with attachment. When you are deeply attached to a dream, your attention is often in the future, in what will happen, in what needs to happen, in what you are still trying to reach. And because of that, the present moment becomes secondary, something you pass through, something you use as a step towards something else. But when the present moment is not fully experienced, life feels incomplete, even if you are moving towards something meaningful, because meaning is not only in the destination, it is in the experience of the journey. And attachment often takes you out of that experience. It makes you rush. It makes you focus only on progress. It makes you overlook what is happening now. And that creates a sense of emptiness. Even when you are doing something you care about, there is also a tightening in your actions when you are attached. You begin to act from fear instead of clarity. You begin to force things, push things, control things, because you feel like you must secure the outcome. And this changes the quality of your actions. They become rigid, less creative, less open, less responsive. Because you are not acting freely. You are acting with a goal that feels necessary for your well-being. And that pressure limits you. It makes it harder to see other possibilities. It makes it harder to adapt. It makes it harder to respond to what is actually happening. Because you are focused on making one specific thing happen. And this focus, when too tight, becomes a barrier. It prevents flow. It prevents natural movement. It prevents life from unfolding in ways you did not expect. There is also a kind of identity that forms around attachment. You begin to define yourself by your dream. This is who I am. This is what I must become. This is what my life is about. And while having direction is valuable, identity built on attachment is fragile. Because if something challenges that dream, it feels like it is challenging you. If something delays it, it feels like you are being delayed. If something changes it, it feels like you are being changed. And this creates insecurity, because your sense of self is tied to something uncertain. But when you are not attached, your identity is more flexible. You can pursue something without becoming it. You can move toward something without needing it to define you. And this creates stability. Because now, your sense of self is not dependent on one outcome. It is rooted in your presence, in your awareness, in your ability to be with life as it is. There is also a freedom that comes with non-attachment, a freedom to explore, to adjust, to let go when something is no longer aligned, without feeling like you have lost yourself, without feeling like you have failed, because your worth is not tied to the dream. It is independent of it. And this allows you to engage with life more openly, more honestly, more flexibly. You can still have dreams, you can still move toward them, but they do not control you. They do not create tension. They do not define your peace. And this changes your experience completely, because now you are not chasing something to complete you. You are expressing something that is already alive within you. And expression feels different from pursuit. It feels natural. It feels aligned. It feels free. There is also a deeper understanding that begins to form, that dreams are meant to be experienced, not possessed. They are meant to guide you, not control you. They are meant to inspire you, not pressure you. And when you relate to them in this way, they become lighter. They become something you can enjoy, something you can move toward without losing yourself. Something that adds to your life, instead of becoming the center of your struggle. This does not mean you care less. It means you care without gripping, without attaching your peace to the outcome, without turning the dream into a condition for your well-being. And this creates a different kind of relationship with what you want. One that is balanced, one that is open, one that allows both movement and stillness to exist together. And from this place, life feels different, less pressured, less tense, more fluid, more responsive. Because you are no longer forcing your desires into existence, you are allowing them to unfold, and that unfolding often brings something deeper than what you expected, not because you controlled it, but because you allowed it. And as this understanding settles, another quiet truth begins to appear. Because when you release attachment, you begin to see something you missed before. You begin to notice that what you need does not always arrive in the form you imagined. It often comes in ways that look simple, ordinary, easy to overlook. And this leads into something even more subtle. Because sometimes what changes your life does not look like something special at all. And as you begin to recognize the quiet value hidden inside ordinary days, something else starts to shift in the way you relate to life itself. You notice that for a long time, you were not just observing life. You were negotiating with it. You were asking it to be different, to feel different, to give you something before you could relax. And without realizing it, you created a silent contract. I will be at peace when life meets my conditions. But what happens when those conditions are never fully met? There is a subtle tension that comes from meeting life with demands. Not loud demands, not spoken ones, but quiet expectations that sit beneath your thoughts. This should not be happening. Things should be easier. People should understand me. I should feel better by now. Life should be moving faster. And every time reality does not match these expectations, something inside tightens. Not because life is wrong, but because the mind is resisting what is. This resistance becomes the source of much of your suffering, not the situation itself, but the demand that the situation must be different. You can be in a simple moment, nothing extreme, nothing unbearable, and still feel uneasy, because the mind is saying, "This is not what I want." That single thought creates distance between you and the moment, and that distance feels like discomfort. It feels like something is off, something is missing, something is not right. But what is actually happening is not always the problem. It is the relationship you have with what is happening. Meeting life without demands is not about lowering your standards. It is not about accepting everything blindly. It is about removing the constant condition that says, only if things go my way can I be at ease. Because that condition keeps you trapped. It makes your peace dependent on external alignment. It makes your well-being fragile. It makes you reactive to everything that does not fit your expectations. When you meet life without demands, something softens. You are no longer forcing reality to match your ideas. You are allowing reality to be seen as it is, and that seeing brings clarity, because now you are not distorting the moment with resistance. You are experiencing it directly. There is a difference between experiencing and resisting. When you resist, you are in conflict. When you experience, you are in contact. And contact brings understanding. You begin to see what is actually happening, not what you think should be happening. This clarity changes how you respond, because now your actions are based on reality, not expectation. You are not reacting to an idea, you are responding to what is present, and that makes your responses more grounded, more effective, more aligned. There is also a release that comes with letting go of demands, a release from the constant pressure to control, to manage, to shape everything into a preferred outcome. This pressure is often invisible, but it is heavy. It sits in your body, in your thoughts, in your reactions, and when it is released, even slightly, you feel lighter. Not because everything has changed, but because you are no longer carrying the weight of trying to make everything change. This lightness allows you to move more freely, to think more clearly, to feel more openly, because you are not closing yourself off with expectation. You are opening yourself to experience. There is also a deeper patience that develops, not forced patience, not passive waiting, but a natural patience that comes from understanding that not everything needs to happen immediately, that life unfolds in its own rhythm. And when you stop demanding that it move faster, you begin to notice that rhythm. You begin to align with it instead of fighting it. This alignment reduces frustration, because frustration often comes from unmet expectations, from wanting things to be different now. But when you release that urgency, frustration loses its intensity. It becomes easier to stay present, to stay grounded, to stay connected. There is also a shift in how you relate to discomfort. When you have demands, discomfort feels like a problem, something that should not be there, something that needs to be removed immediately. But when you meet life without demands, discomfort becomes something you can observe, something you can feel without immediately trying to change it. This does not mean you enjoy discomfort. It means you are not adding extra resistance to it. And that changes how it feels. Because resistance amplifies experience. It makes things feel heavier, more intense, more overwhelming. But when resistance is reduced, the experience becomes more manageable, more contained, more clear. There is also a deeper understanding that develops around control. You begin to see that control is limited, that not everything can be shaped according to your will, and instead of fighting this, you accept it, not as defeat, but as reality. And this acceptance creates peace, because you are no longer struggling against something that cannot be changed. You are working with what is. There is also a change in how you see others. When you meet life with demands, you often place those demands on people. They should behave a certain way, they should understand you, they should respond how you expect, and when they do not, you feel disappointed, frustrated, disconnected. But when you release demands, you begin to see people more clearly, as they are, not as you want them to be. And this creates space for real connection, because you are not trying to change them, you are understanding them. And understanding builds bridges. While expectation often creates distance, there is also a sense of freedom in this way of living, because you are no longer constantly evaluating your experience. You are not asking, is this good enough? Is this what I wanted? Should this be different? You are simply present, experiencing, responding, and that simplicity brings peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are not complicating it with constant judgment. There is also a deeper connection with yourself that forms, because when you stop demanding that your experience be different, you begin to accept your own internal state, your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, without immediately trying to fix them. And this acceptance creates space, space for awareness, space for understanding, space for change to happen naturally, because change often requires seeing clearly. And you cannot see clearly when you are constantly trying to control. There is also a shift in how you approach goals. You can still have direction, you can still move forward, but you are not demanding that everything align perfectly. You are flexible, open, responsive. And this makes your journey more sustainable, because you are not burning yourself out trying to meet rigid expectations. You are adapting, learning, growing in a way that feels natural. There is also a quiet confidence that develops, a sense that you can meet whatever comes, not because you know everything, but because you trust your ability to respond. And this trust reduces fear, because fear often comes from the belief that you cannot handle what happens. But when you meet life without demands, you are already practicing being with what is, and that builds resilience. There is also a deeper peace that comes from this practice, not the kind that depends on everything going well, but the kind that exists even when things are uncertain, even when things are not perfect, because your peace is no longer conditional. It is not based on external alignment, it is based on your relationship with the moment. And that relationship is something you can cultivate through awareness, through presence, through letting go of unnecessary demands. This does not mean you never have preferences. It means you are not controlled by them. You can prefer something without needing it. You can want something without demanding it. And that creates balance, because you are not suppressing your desires. You are simply not attaching your peace to them. There is also a deeper sense of flow that emerges, because when you are not resisting what is happening, life moves more smoothly, not without challenges, but without added tension. You are able to move through situations with more ease, more clarity, more openness. Because you are not constantly pushing against reality, you are moving with it, and this movement feels natural, aligned, less forced. There is also a subtle joy in this way of living, a quiet contentment, not based on achieving something, but based on being present, on experiencing life as it is, without needing it to be something else. And this joy is stable, because it is not dependent on conditions. It arises from your relationship with the moment. And that relationship is something you can return to again and again. There is also a deeper realization that forms. That much of your suffering came not from life itself, but from the conditions you placed on it. The belief that things must be a certain way before you can be okay. And when that belief loosens, something shifts. You begin to feel more at ease, more grounded, more connected, because you are no longer fighting what is. You are meeting it, fully, openly, without demand. And in that meeting, something becomes clear. Because when you stop asking life to be different before you receive it, you begin to see what it has been offering all along. And that seeing changes everything. Because now you are not waiting, you are receiving. And receiving opens a different door. A door where what you attract is no longer based on what you chase, but on who you are becoming inside. And as you begin to meet life without demands, something very quiet begins to grow inside you. You are no longer waiting for the world to change before you feel at ease. You are no longer asking every moment to prove something to you. And in that softening, something unexpected starts to form, a sense of fullness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer resisting what is already here. And this fullness does something powerful. It changes what you notice. It changes how you move. And slowly, it begins to change what comes into your life. There is a common belief that what you attract comes from what you want. That if you desire something strongly enough, it will find its way to you. But desire alone is not what shapes your experience. It is your inner state, the way you feel within yourself, the way you relate to your life, the energy you carry without even trying. And when that inner state is built on lack, everything you attract reflects that lack. Not in a direct, obvious way, but in a subtle pattern. You reach for people who complete something you feel is missing. You chase opportunities that promise to fill a gap inside you. You make decisions based on what you think will finally make you feel whole. And because that feeling is not stable, what you attract often reflects that instability. Things feel uncertain, unclear, temporary, because they are built on something that is not grounded. But when inner fullness begins to grow, something changes. You are no longer trying to fill yourself from the outside. You are not approaching life with the quiet question, "What can I get from this?" You are moving from a place that already feels complete, and that changes your direction, because now you are not pulled by need. You are guided by clarity. This clarity affects your choices. You no longer accept what does not align, not out of judgment, but out of understanding. You can feel the difference between something that fits and something that does not. And because you are not desperate, you are able to walk away from what is not right. That alone changes what you allow into your life. Because when you are empty, you accept more than you should. You tolerate what does not feel right. You stay in situations that drain you. You hold on to connections that are not balanced, not because they are good for you, but because you are afraid of losing something. But when you feel full, you do not hold on in the same way. You are able to release, not because you do not care, but because you are not dependent. And that independence creates space for something more aligned to enter. There is also a change in how others respond to you, not because you are trying to attract anything, but because your presence is different. When you are not seeking validation, you are more grounded. When you are not chasing approval, you are more stable. When you are not trying to prove yourself, you are more at ease. And that ease is felt. People sense it. Situations respond to it. Because you are not bringing tension into your interactions. You are not trying to take something. You are simply present. And presence is powerful. It allows connection to happen naturally, without force, without pressure, without expectation. There is also a deeper shift in how you approach opportunities. When you are coming from lack, you often rush. You try to secure something quickly. You fear missing out. You say yes without fully seeing, because you are afraid of losing the chance. But when you are full, you do not rush in the same way. You take your time. You observe. You feel into what is right. And this allows you to make better decisions. Because you are not acting from urgency, you are responding from awareness. This awareness allows you to recognize what truly aligns with you. Not what looks good on the surface, not what promises something, but what actually fits your life. And when you choose from that place, what you bring into your life is different. It is more stable, more meaningful, more aligned with who you are. There is also a change in how you experience success. When you are empty, success feels like relief, something that temporarily fills a gap. But the feeling does not last, because the gap remains. But when you are full, success feels like expansion. It adds to what is already there. It does not define you. It does not complete you. It simply becomes part of your experience. And that makes it easier to enjoy, because you are not holding on to it tightly. You are not afraid of losing it. You are able to experience it without pressure. There is also a deeper sense of stability that comes with inner fullness, because you are not constantly seeking something outside yourself. Your sense of balance comes from within, and that makes you less reactive, less dependent on external conditions, less affected by changes, because your foundation is not outside, it is within. This does not mean you do not care about your life. It means your peace is not controlled by it. And that gives you freedom. Freedom to act without fear. Freedom to choose without pressure. Freedom to move without constant doubt. There is also a deeper understanding that forms. That what you attract is not always about what you want. It is about what you are available for. And when you are full, you are available for different things. You are open to deeper connections, more meaningful opportunities, more aligned experiences. Because you are not filtering everything through need, you are seeing clearly, and clarity changes everything. It changes what you notice. It changes what you respond to. It changes what you allow. And over time, this shapes your experience. There is also a subtle shift in your energy, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. You move differently, you speak differently, you engage differently, because you are not carrying the weight of lack. You are not trying to extract something from every situation. You are not evaluating everything based on what you can gain. You are present, and presence creates a different dynamic. It allows things to unfold naturally, without pressure, without force, without the need to control. This is where the idea of attraction begins to make sense in a grounded way. Not as something magical, but as something relational. You are not pulling things into your life through desire alone. You are creating conditions through your inner state. And those conditions influence what appears, because life responds to how you meet it. When you meet it with need, it reflects that need. When you meet it with fullness, it reflects that fullness. This does not mean everything becomes perfect. It means your experience becomes more aligned, more stable, more clear. There is also a deeper peace that comes from this, because you are no longer trying to get something from every moment. You are not looking at life as something that must give you something. You are experiencing it as it is, and that experience is enough, not in a limiting way, but in a grounding way. Because when you feel enough, you are not chasing, you are not pushing, you are not forcing. And that creates space for things to come. Not because you demand them, but because you are open to them. There is also a deeper trust that develops. A trust that you do not need to control everything to be okay. A trust that what is meant for you will not require constant struggle, a trust that you can meet what comes with clarity. And this trust reduces fear. Because fear often comes from uncertainty, from the belief that you need something to feel complete. But when you feel full, that belief weakens. You are not afraid of not getting something, because you are not empty without it. And this removes a lot of pressure. It allows you to move through life with more ease, more openness, more confidence. There is also a deeper connection with yourself, because you are no longer trying to become something else. You are not chasing an identity. You are not building yourself based on external validation. You are simply being. And from that being, everything else flows. Your actions, your choices, your connections, your direction, they all come from a place that is stable. And that stability changes what you attract, not because you are trying to attract anything, but because you are aligned. And alignment brings clarity. It brings balance. It brings a sense of flow, where things begin to fit more naturally, not perfectly, but more smoothly, more honestly, more truthfully. And this creates a different experience of life, one that is not built on constant searching, but on quiet receiving, not built on pressure, but on presence. And as this understanding deepens, something else begins to emerge, because when you feel full, you no longer rush. You no longer feel like you must get somewhere quickly. You begin to understand timing differently. You begin to see that waiting does not always mean lack. Sometimes it means alignment is still unfolding, and learning to wait without anxiety becomes something powerful. Something that changes not only how you move, but how you experience time itself. And as inner fullness begins to steady your movement, something subtle starts to change in how you relate to time. You no longer feel the same urgency. You are not rushing every step. You are not trying to pull the future closer, and yet something in the mind still whispers. Why is it not happening yet? Because even when you stop chasing, waiting remains. And waiting, for many people, is one of the most uncomfortable experiences of all. There is a kind of waiting that feels heavy, a waiting filled with tension, a waiting that feels like something is missing. But there is another kind of waiting, one that is quiet, steady, clear. And this kind of waiting is not weakness, it is wisdom. There is a deep misunderstanding about waiting. Most people see it as delay, as something to endure, as a gap between where they are and where they want to be. And because of that, waiting becomes uncomfortable. The mind fills it with questions. Why is this taking so long? What if it never happens? Am I doing something wrong? Should I be doing more? And these questions create anxiety, not because waiting itself is painful, but because the mind is resisting the fact that things are not happening immediately. It is trying to escape the space between now and what is next. But that space is not empty. It only feels empty because the mind is focused on what is not there. It is looking ahead, searching for something that has not arrived yet. And in doing so, it disconnects from what is already here. This is why waiting often feels uncomfortable, not because nothing is happening, but because you are not present for what is happening. The mind is somewhere else, trying to speed things up, trying to control the timing, trying to predict the outcome. But time does not respond to pressure. It does not move faster because you are anxious. It does not change direction because you are worried. It continues at its own pace. And when you fight that pace, you create tension. But when you begin to accept it, something changes. You stop pushing against time. You stop demanding that things happen now. You begin to allow the process to unfold. And this is where waiting becomes wisdom, because now you are not resisting what is happening. You are working with it. There is a difference between passive waiting and conscious waiting. Passive waiting feels like you are stuck, like you are doing nothing, like you are losing time. But conscious waiting is active, not in movement, but in awareness. You are present, you are attentive, you are engaged with the moment. Even if nothing external is changing, this kind of waiting is powerful because it keeps you connected, it keeps you grounded, it keeps you available. Instead of pulling your attention into the future, it anchors you in the present. And in that presence, something important happens. You begin to notice that waiting is not empty. It is filled with small movements, subtle changes, quiet developments, things that you would not see if you were only focused on the end result. There is also a kind of patience that grows in this space. Not forced patience, not the kind where you are pretending to be calm while feeling restless inside, but a real patience, one that comes from understanding that things take time, that not everything can be rushed, that some processes require unfolding. And this understanding reduces anxiety, because anxiety often comes from trying to speed up what cannot be sped up. It comes from the belief that things should be happening faster. But when you accept that they are happening at their own pace, that pressure fades. You are no longer fighting the timeline. You are moving with it. There is also a deeper trust that develops, a trust that things are not stuck, even when they appear still, because stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of subtle movement. Things are aligning, conditions are forming, paths are opening, even if you cannot see it yet. And this trust allows you to relax, not completely, but enough to reduce the constant tension, enough to stay present, enough to experience the moment without needing it to be something else. There is also a shift in how you relate to uncertainty. When you are anxious, uncertainty feels threatening because you do not know what will happen, and the mind wants certainty. It wants answers, it wants control. But when you wait without anxiety, uncertainty becomes something else. It becomes possibility. Because now you are not afraid of what might happen. You are open to it. You are willing to see, to respond, to adapt. And this openness creates flexibility. It allows you to move when movement is needed, and to stay still when stillness is appropriate, without forcing either. There is also a deeper connection with the present moment, because when you are not anxious about the future, your attention returns to what is here. You notice your surroundings, your thoughts, your body, your experience. And this noticing brings you back into your life. Instead of living in anticipation, you begin to live in presence. And presence changes everything, because it is where clarity happens, where understanding develops, where real experience occurs. There is also a subtle strength in waiting without anxiety, because it requires you to remain steady, to not react immediately, to not rush into action out of fear, to stay grounded even when things are uncertain. And that steadiness builds resilience. It strengthens your ability to handle situations without being overwhelmed. Because you are not constantly reacting, you are observing, responding, choosing your actions carefully. This makes your decisions more thoughtful, more aligned. Because they are not driven by urgency, they are guided by awareness. There is also a deeper level of acceptance that forms, not acceptance of everything as permanent, but acceptance of what is present. You are no longer rejecting the moment because it is not what you want. You are allowing it to be what it is. And that allowance reduces resistance, it reduces tension, it creates space. And in that space, things can change naturally. Because change does not always come from force. It often comes from allowing things to move at their own pace. There is also a shift in how you see progress. When you are anxious, progress feels slow, insufficient, not enough. But when you are calm, you begin to see progress in small ways, in subtle changes, in quiet developments. And this changes your perception. You are no longer waiting for a big moment to confirm that something is happening. You are noticing the process, and the process becomes meaningful. There is also a sense of ease that comes with this. Not because everything is easy, but because you are not making it harder. You are not adding extra pressure, extra worry, extra tension. You are allowing things to unfold, and that makes the experience lighter, more manageable, more grounded. There is also a deeper realization that forms that waiting is not separate from life. It is part of it. You are always waiting for something, a result, a change, a response. But that does not mean life is paused. It means life is moving in a different way. And when you see this, waiting no longer feels like a gap. It feels like a phase where things are developing, where alignment is happening, where clarity is forming. And this changes your relationship with it. You no longer resist it, you engage with it. There is also a quiet confidence that grows, because you begin to trust yourself, your ability to remain steady, your ability to handle what comes, your ability to move when the time is right. And this confidence reduces the need to rush. Because you are not afraid of missing something, you trust that you will recognize it when it appears. And this trust allows you to stay present, without constantly scanning the future. There is also a deeper sense of balance between action and stillness, between movement and waiting. You are not forcing action when it is not needed, and you are not avoiding action when it is required. You are responding to what is happening with awareness, with clarity, with calm. And this balance creates a different experience of life, one that is not driven by urgency, but by alignment. There is also a subtle joy in this way of waiting, not excitement, but a quiet contentment, a sense that you are not losing time, that you are not missing out, that you are part of the unfolding. And this feeling is important, because it removes the fear that often comes with waiting. It replaces it with trust, with presence, with openness. And as this understanding deepens, something else becomes clear. Because when you are no longer anxious about waiting, you begin to relate to people differently. You are not rushing them. You are not forcing connections. You are not trying to make others choose you. And this creates a new kind of freedom. A freedom from needing validation. A freedom from needing immediate responses.